Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Welcome to part 5 of the series on Mecca. Here we're going to be discussing legends of the former peoples. It might come as a surprise, but in the Qur'an we have many mentions of the messengers of God instructing what the truth is to their people. And what is the response from their people? These are not except legends of the former peoples. These are fables. These are fantasies, myths. Almost as if every culture has had a memory, their memory has been wiped out, and now any recollection they have of the past is now ultimately a fairy tale. So, in a sense, we get the idea that Allah is pointing us to all of the stories we've inherited having some kind of a real basis to them. And inshallah, I'm going to try to show you that what we have as a legacy of our legends and stories is fundamentally talking about the same places referenced in the Quran. That might be hard to imagine because we are kind of so used to looking at the Quran from a Arab-centric lens. Okay? But the Quran doesn't even identify that as the region whatsoever. And if you've watched up until this series, you're probably more than convinced that there is something deeply wrong with what they have ascribed to where these events in the Quran have happened. So, when I was talking to you about the navel of the earth in part 1, in part 3, what is this really talking about? This is really talking about the Kaaba, about Mecca. Because remember, the purpose of this series is to try to find what Mecca is in actuality. So without further ado, we'll get right into it. So I think that if you haven't seen this section, you should definitely check out parts 1 and 3. And that'll get you up to speed as to the context of some of these highlights. So what you're going to see is this blog shows you a lot of information from a book by a Christian from the 1800s, and he basically concluded that Eden and Jerusalem are in the same place, mainly because it's in the center of the universe. And what you're going to find is that the North Pole, what we would call the North Pole today, is more or less the same place every culture has memories of. So a lot of the quotes are from this book. It's called Paradise Found. So notice in what we've seen is every culture has taken their specific place, whether it's in Mexico or India or Japan, and they have just superimposed this original place over their current residence, as you would, because you want to be reminded of the past. And over time that became lost, and so they confuse their current residence with the mythological story. So in Mexico City, the great temple of Tenochtitlan, that was their empire, was at the center of the island that they lived on. There's a stone marking Kilomètre Zero on the Ile de la Cité, Paris, in Paris. Okay, so it's again on an island, and you're going to find the same types of attributes throughout these stories. The Kanro Dai pillar at the Tenrikyo main sanctuary in Japan. That's another religion as well. The monument at El Mitad del Mundo, north of Quito in Ecuador. Lake Poso in the center of the island of Sulawesi, Indonesia. The pivot of the heavens and the earth, and the spot where a rope once joined the two. Okay. We're going to talk a lot about that in this video. Did you know that Hindus in India plant sacred tulsi shrubs in their courtyards with ample space around for reverential circumambulation known as domestic pradakshina. They repeat this perambulation 108 times while reciting the 108 names of Vishnu, keeping their right shoulder turned towards the point, mimicking the revolution of the celestial bodies around Polaris. Similarly, at Vishnu temples, devotees walk circles around the outside either 7 or 108 times, always keeping their right shoulder towards it. Buddhists in Sri Lanka circumambulate their Dagoba shrines the same way. The sacred Adi Granth, the Sikh Bible, is kept at the Golden Temple of Amritsar, where devotees perform ritual reverential circumambulation around the sanctuary that houses the book 3, 5, or 7 times. Christian bishops, when consecrating a church, make 3 circuits around the building, sprinkling holy water, and priests perambulate the altar, incensing it while reciting a prayer which includes mention of this circular worship. Circumdato altare tuum, Domine. Several initiation rituals of the Freemasons include circumambulation around central placed shrines. The stringing of lights around a Christmas tree, topped with a star, is another example of this tradition, mimicking the luminaries' revolution around Polaris and the reason a godlike figure, Santa Claus, resides at the North Pole. Then there is the old Highlander ceremony of going day seal, sunwise. Round chapels, houses, people, and cattle, now done for luck, but preserving for us a lingering trace of the worship practiced by their ancestors. It is also done round graves, and it was a common custom to turn oneself round to the right at the beginning and end of journeys for luck, as well as at weddings and other occasions. The Lap, or Sami people of Scandinavia, tell a folk tale about a man who disappeared in the wintertime. His wife tracked him in the snow, finding that he had walked repeatedly in circles around a bush, and that after several circuits around the bush, his human footsteps suddenly turned into bear tracks. Notice, this folktale preserves the tradition of polar, stellar, Ursa Major, the Great Bear, worship, and the perambulation of a sacred tree in the far north. This is what people do in Saudi Arabia today around the Kaaba, right? The dance of the stars was an ancient classic idea in Greece and Rome. Plato spoke of the turnings and dances of the stars. Manilius, too, used the words signorumque choros, which are to be understood as the dance of the signs or constellations, and which is like the Zoroastrians calling the Great Bear the leader of the stars in the north. The word chorus seems originally to have meant a round dance. According to Aratos, the 2 other stars next to Polaris in the Little Bear's tail were called the dancers. We're talking about tawaf. Brothers and sisters, this is a worldwide remembered phenomenon, not just within Sunni or Shia Islam. The traditional European maypole dance, I'm going to show you this when we talk about the sacred tree, for example, features a central tree or pillar topped with a cross and 2 equal-sized circles on either side representing the sun and moon. Dancers circle around the maypole holding long colorful streamers which wrap and weave around the central pillar, causing the dancers to narrow their circles. The pillar is Polaris at the pole. The dancers represent the fixed and wandering stars, while the spiraling streamers show the paths of the sun and moon over and around the earth. The Sufi Muslim sect known as the Mevlevi order, or the whirling dervishes, have also preserved a form of polar worship with their circular dance, which is said to represent the harmonious movement of the universe. The dervishes wear a conical cap directed to the zenith, point their right hand to heaven and their left to earth, then spin circles in place, causing their robes to flare out, making another conical circle around them, all while internally, incessantly intoning the name of God, Allah. The founder of the Mevlevi himself wrote that he who is above all combination, all distinction, is a tree without branches or trunk or roots to which the mind can be attached. This references a concept found all over the ancient world regarding a macrocosmic and microcosmic world tree, what the Norse call Yggdrasil, the Germans called Irmensul, the Hindu Jambudvipa, the Taoist paradisical tongue tree, the Buddhist Buddhi tree of wisdom, the giant tree of the Finnish Kalevala, the Celtic golden apple tree of Avalon, the Egyptian tree of life, and the tree at the center of the biblical Garden of Eden. I'm just showing this so we can figure out what our stories are pointing to could possibly be in the real place called Mecca. So eventually, when we get to it, we can use the Quran to corroborate or exclude any of these hints. The Norse Yggdrasil tree exists at the very center of their world and cosmology, with its roots descending into hell, its mid-branches overarching the earth, and its top reaching to heaven. Likewise, the medieval legend of Seth's visit to the Garden of Eden sees a central tree of life with its crown in the heaven and roots in hell, distilling a life-saving oil of mercy obtained for his dying father. The Hindu world tree also provided their gods with an immortality drink called soma, and existed at the North Pole with its roots reaching to the underworld of Yama, god of death, its top extending to the heavenly realm of the benevolent gods, and its body the central sustaining axis of the universe. The Mayan world tree similarly was called Yaxchelkab, which means the first tree of the world, and was a gigantic central cosmic ceiba tree, with its trunk planted on earth, reaching straight upwards through circular holes made in 7 heavenly celestial planes that souls of the dead ascend according to merit. The Lenni Lenape Native Americans even performed religious rituals in large tree houses, using live trunks as the central post to physically embody this symbolism. To this day, many Mayan village centers have a single sacred ceiba tree growing due to these surviving ancient beliefs. They always plant them within sight of the town hall, offer incense to them, elect their mayors beneath them, and have done so for countless centuries. The cosmic image of the ancient Nahua tribes of Texcoco, Chalco, and Tlaxcala distinguished 9 underworlds and as many heavens, while the Aztecs sometimes spoke of 13. According to the original concept, these heavens were the steps by which the sun ascended from east to west during the morning, and by which he descended in the afternoon in order to effect a parallel journey at night when passing through the kingdom of the dead. This cosmology doesn't reflect anything what we're told in today's modern science. In 1982, anthropologist Peter Rowe completed an exhaustive study of 105 Amazonian tribes and found their cosmology strikingly similar. He summarized their worldviews as follows. There is a disc-shaped earth surrounded by an ocean. This disc is sandwiched between upper and lower worlds, which are often subdivided into several levels. There is also a world tree with its roots in the underworld and its crown in the heavens. The original legend of the Bodhi tree of wisdom placed it at the center of the earth, where it helped Gautama Buddha pass over the celestial water to reach nirvana. When Buddha was unable to cross from one bank to the other, the spirit of the Bodhi tree stretched its arms to aid him across, and then sitting underneath the tree he gained enlightenment. In Buddhist art and sculpture, the Bodhi is often pictured with the Chatra umbrella symbol above it. The paradise tree of the Chinese Taoists is also a world tree. It is found in the center of the enchanting garden of the gods, on the summit of the polar Kunlun. Its name is Dong, and its location is further denned by the expression that it grows hard by the closed gate of heaven. As in many of the ancient religions, the mount on which after the flood the ark rested was considered the same as that from which in the beginning the first man came forth. It is not strange to find the tree on top of the mountain of paradise remembered in some of the legends of the deluge. In the Taoist legend, it seems to take the place of the ark. Thus, we are told that one extraordinary antediluvian saved his life by climbing up a mountain, and there and then, in the manner of birds plaiting a nest, he passed his days on a tree. whilst all the country below him was one sheet of water. He afterwards lived to a very old age, and could testify to his late posterity that a whole race of human beings had been swept from the face of the earth. It is at least suggestive to find this same idea of salvation from a universal deluge by means of a miraculous tree growing on the top of the divine mountain of the north among the Navajo Indians of our own country. Speaking of the men of the world before our own, and of the warning they had received of the approaching flood, their legends go on. Then they took soil from all the four corner mountains of the world, and placed it on top of the mountain that stood in the north, and thither they all went, including the people of the mountains, the salt women, and such animals as then lived in the third world. When the soil was laid on the mountain, the latter began to grow higher and higher, but the waters continued to rise, and the people climbed upwards to escape the flood. You can pause this video at any point and just read this for yourself to gain an idea that this has been documented in the Quran. First and foremost, if that doesn't sound like the story of Prophet Nuh, then you should probably read it again. The ancient Egyptians, Phoenicians, Persians, Greeks, Syrians, and Assyrians all had their own versions of a world tree as well. The Greek winged oak of Pherecydes and the holy palm of Apollo in the Hyperborean garden of Hesperides were two stories of this sacred tree. The Egyptian tree of life was located at the axis of the earth and was home to Bennu, the sunbird, who sat upon its branches. The north wind from his polar perch yielded a life-sustaining celestial rain upon the earth, and down to Duat, the underworld. The Persian Zoroastrian tree grew atop the summit of Hara-Berazaiti, the world's tallest mountain at the geographic center point of the universe, around which the stars revolved, and behind which the sun hid at night. It was home to Ardvi Surah, the polar headspring source of all waters falling from heavenly rivers to earth before descending to the underworld. The original river is from the sky, the division takes place on the heights at the pole, and the four resulting rivers are the chief streams of the circumpolar continent as they descend in different directions to the surrounding sea. We're going to look at all of these in greater detail individually. I just want to show you this compilation of stories. In Persian thought, not only the paradise rivers, but also the rivers of the whole earth have but one headspring and but one place of discharge. The headspring is the Ardvi Surah, situated in heaven, the heaven of the pole. This heavenly fountain, says Haug, summarizing the contents of the Aban Yasht, has 1,000 springs and 1,000 canals, each of them 40 days' journey long. Thence a channel goes through all the 7 Kishvaras, or regions of the earth, conveying everywhere pure celestial waters. In the Mexican version, Tlaloc, the god of water, lives atop the world's tallest mountain, whence come all the earth's rains and streams. In the Indian version, the heaven spring Ganga falls upon Mount Meru, first watering the land of the gods at the pole, then flowing outward towards the cardinal points from 4 main rivers into the Arctic Ocean. The Hindu epic Mahabharata says the headspring exists in the highest heaven of Vishnu, high above the highest star Dhruva or Polaris. During their descent, the waters first wash Dhruva, then the 7 rishis of the Big Dipper, and then fall atop Mount Meru, where the heavenly Ganga river divides into 4 mighty rivers flowing in opposite directions and feeds the world's oceans. You're going to see a lot of rivers, mountains, trees, paradise, birds, serpents. Among primeval peoples who observed the connection between the rains and the springs and water courses which were manifestly swelled by them, all waters became of supernal origin, the gift of the heavens' God. And thus the heavens' river, clearly discerned by the eye of faith in the heavens as the Milky Way, became the generation and sanctifier of all earthly rivers. According to Josephus, the Ganges, Tigris, Euphrates, and Nile were but members of the one great ocean river of the Greeks, which ran about the whole earth, which Aristotle described as having its origin in the upper heavens, descending in rain upon the earth, feeding, as Hesiod Homer, and Euripides said all fountains and rivers and every sea, then branching out into the rivers of the underworld. Okeanos, the great earth encircling river. Homer wrote that Okeanos was where all rivers and every sea and all fountains flow. Hesiod, in his Theogony, similarly wrote that all rivers as sons and all fountains and brooks as daughters are traced back to Okeanos, where we get the word ocean from. The Greek poets personified Okeanos as a god, the great sea god who girdles the entire world. Or as Aeschylus wrote, he who with his sleepless current encircles the whole earth. Plato also wrote of Okeanos, directly connecting it with the four polar rivers in his Phaedo, stating, among the many are four streams, the greatest and outermost of which is that called Okeanos, which flows round in a circle. And if any doubt remains, Orphic Hymn 83 explicitly mentions the fountain at the pole, Okeanos whose nature ever flows, from whom at first both gods and men arose, sire incorruptible, whose waves surround, and earth's all terminating circle bound. Hence every river, hence the spreading sea, and earth's pure bubbling fountains spring from thee. Hear, mighty sire, for boundless bliss is thine, greatest cathartic of the powers divine. Earth's friendly limit, fountain of the pole, whose waves wide spreading and circumfluent roll. We are just describing what our legends say about this place that the Quran points to as Mecca. The Chinese story of Mount Kunlun and the Tong tree also features Tianho, the many-channeled river or river of eight, which falls and separates at the pole. The headspring of these celestial waters and source of this mythology is none other than that area of the heavens known to the ancients as the Dark Rift, and better known to us as the Milky Way. In the Chinese version, celestial rainfall from the Milky Way descends on the North Pole, separating into many channels. However, all waters are simply portions of the same heaven-descending stream. The other innumerable waters and rivers, springs and channels are one in origin with those, so in various districts and various places they call them by various names. Even plant sap, blood, milk are parts of the one cosmic current. All these, through growth or the body which is formed, mingle again with the rivers, for the body which is formed and the growth are both one. Everything is of liquid nature. Everything of a liquid nature, therefore, in the whole world is conceived of as a proceeding from one source high in the North Polar sky. These are all quotes largely from Dr. William Warren Paradise Found, the cradle of the human race at the North Pole. The concept of holy water exists in nearly all of the world's religions, from Christianity, Islam, Sikhism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Jainism. The Christian cross itself is the shape of the four rivers at the North Pole, and before entering church, the parishioner dips their fingers in holy water and touches 4 points on their bodies. To bless the water, the priest first makes the sign of the cross over the basin, touches the surface with the palm of his hand, and says, I bless thee, creature of water, by the God that made thee issue from the earthly paradise in 4 rivers. In Buddhism, monks similarly bless vessels of holy water, then use special wooden fans to sprinkle the water over the temple goers. In Islam, followers drink or wash in water from their sacred Zamzam well in Makkah. So here you have a picture of the maypole. Remember, in the Qur'an, we have this idea of garlands, qala'id. That's in part 1. That's nowhere mentioned in Saudi Arabia or performed today. For observers standing at the pole, the heavens would appear to have been created just for them. Their unique perspective places Polaris, the only motionless star in the sky, perfectly situated directly above them, with all the other visible stars rotating horizontal left to right paths, 360 degrees around, all at an apparently equal distance away. The sun and moon also rotate horizontally around the polar observer, with the sun rising and setting only once per year, creating 6-month days and 6-month nights. Remember, the people of Quraysh were told, in Mecca had 360 gods, okay? One for every day of the year. For the degrees of a circle, they are a central nation. To the man at the pole, the heavenly dome above will seem to revolve around him, from left to right, somewhat like the motion of a hat or umbrella turned over one's head. The stars will not rise and set, but will move round and round in horizontal planes, turning like a potter's wheel, and starting on a second round when the first is finished, and so on during the long night of 6 months. The sun, when he is above the horizon for 6 months, would also appear to revolve in the same way. The center of the celestial dome over the head of the observer will be the celestial North Pole, and naturally enough, his north will be overhead, while the invisible regions below the horizon would be in the south. That's from Lokamanya Bal Gangadhar Tilak, the Arctic home in the Vedas. In all, a year at the pole sees approximately 6 months of continuous daylight, followed by a month and a half of evening twilight, then 3 months of relative darkness, ending in a month and a half long spring dawn. Notice all of these words are mentioned in the Quran: the dawn, the twilight, the daylight, the night. The polar 6-month day and 6-month night has been written about by diverse cultures throughout history, many insisting that their ancestors or gods were the original inhabitants. In the ancient Indian Vedas, the day of the gods and night of the gods were each 6 months in duration, and their gods lived atop Mount Meru at the North Pole. The Surya Siddhanta 12:67 states that at Meru gods behold the sun after but a single rising during the half of his revolution, beginning with Aries, and the Institutes of Vishnu say, the southern progress of the sun is with them a night, and a year is with them a day and a night. In Norse mythology, it is claimed that before the present established order of the world, their sun rose in the south, which is what would have been experienced by their polar ancestors. In ancient Iranian mythology, Yima, the first man and king of the Golden Age, lived in an Edenic abode called Vara, where the sun only rose and set once per year. In Greek mythology, the gods rule from Mount Olympus, and as the Iliad states, from the upper sky, the celestial dome in which sun, moon, and stars wheel silently around the pole. In the Vedas, Indra supports the heavens as on a pole, and upholds the heaven and earth, and turns the widest expanse as the wheels of a chariot are held by the axle. An imaginary line from the North Pole to Polaris would appear perfectly vertical and like a handle supporting the twirling umbrella of the heavens, or an axis supporting the wheel of a chariot. If we combine the two statements, that the heavens are supported as on a pole, and that they move like a wheel, we may safely infer that the motion referred to is such a motion of the celestial hemisphere as can be witnessed only by an observer at the North Pole. At Meru, the sun and the moon go round from left to right every day, and so do all the stars. The day and the night are together equal to a year and to the residents of that place. The ancient laws of Manu 1:67 state, a human year is a day and a night of the gods. Thus are the two divided. The northern passage of the sun is the day and the southern the night. And the Taittiriya Brahmana says, that which is a year is but a single day of the gods. In the collection of the ancient Zoroastrian text known as the Avesta, the Aryan paradise, known as Airana Vaio, is described as a blissful place where the sun rose only once per year and was destroyed by relentless snow and ice, forcing the inhabitants, Earth's original progenitors, to migrate southwards. This same idea that the first humans devolved from God or gods at the North Pole is replete within ancient scriptures, and starkly contrasts modern mainstream claims that the first humans evolved from primates in Africa. We know that so many people that do comparative mythology, comparative theology with the Quran and Hinduism, identify Manu as Nuh. They identify this Aryan paradise as Firdaus. They identify so many things that we're just not told. A continent once existed within the Arctic Circle, of which at present only vestiges remain. Mr. Alfred Russel Wallace, notice this guy is the person that Darwin plagiarized his theory of evolution by natural selection from. Okay? He incidentally shows that the facts of Arctic paleontology call for the supposition of a primitive Eocene continent in the highest latitudes, a continent which no longer exists. Basically, what they're telling us is that the flora and fauna of this place, what we see near the northern latitudes is there has to be a rich paradisical place coming from the north, the far north. His languages, the rich and varied fauna which inhabited Europe at the dawn of the Tertiary period, as shown by the abundant remains of mammalia wherever suitable deposits of Eocene age have been discovered, proves that an extensive Palearctic continent then existed. Another more eminent authority in Arctic paleontology, the late professor here of Zurich, fully 15 years ago arrived at and published the conclusion that the facts presented in the Arctic fossil record plainly point to the existence in Miocene time of a no longer existing polar continent. Speaking of certain rock strata north of the 68th degree of north latitude, remember, we're not allowed to go beyond that point. He says, an extensive continent occupied this portion of the globe when these strata were deposited. Elsewhere, he speaks of this ancient polar continent as something already accepted and universally understood among scientific men. So it's not just really the legends from culture or religion, it's actually from scientists of that time as well. This is all hadith, essentially. In 1786, Sir William Jones, a Supreme Court judge who could speak 30 languages, gave his 3rd anniversary discourse to the Asiatic Society, where he declared that the similarities between Sanskrit, Greek, Latin, German, Celtic, and Persian languages could only be explained on the hypothesis that they all shared a common parentage. His contemporary, the German philosopher Hegel, compared the consequences of Jones's revelation to the discovery of a whole new world, and his groundbreaking work on the subject established him as the founder of comparative linguistics. There is a common language to all the ones we speak today. This is what they concluded very early on. Scholar and renowned linguist Charles Berlitz of Berlitz Language School spoke an amazing 32 languages, and just like Sir William Jones, his life's research in comparative linguistics led him to the inescapable conclusion that all the world's languages must trace back to a single lost ancient dialect. Researcher and author John G. Bennett also wrote a paper entitled The Hyperborean Origin of Indo-European Culture, in which he argues that ancient languages were more advanced and have devolved into our current languages, and likely originally trace back to a lost polar civilization. I would suggest this language is the Arabic in the Quran. The Quranic Arabic is this language, and it was spoken at the time of the Prophet and probably before him as well in this central civilization. Ummat al-Wasta. Ummat al-Wasatan. Okay? So let me just show you some more parallels between different legends and stories. Similar to Thule and Hyperborea, the Celts also had their northern terrestrial paradise known as Avalon. Saint Brandon, son of Finloyo, a famous saint of the Irish Church who died in 576 AD, was allegedly the first to reach this land during a sea voyage to the north. Similar to other ancient accounts, Saint Brandon mentioned a fountain with 4 directional streams and claimed they were magnificent castles and castle halls, lighted with self-luminous stones and adorned with all manner of precious jewels surpassing description. The Phrygian explorers claimed to reach an island where they encountered giant human beings living in caves and underground hollows. The giants' domiciles were adorned in gold and precious metals, which some of the Phrygians stupidly attempted to steal, and were swiftly chased back to their boats, minus one of their comrades caught by a giant who in a twinkling tore him to pieces before their eyes. They never reached the North Pole or a magnetic mountain, but did encounter an incredible feature long alleged to surround them. Ancient Norse legend states that a gigantic violent maelstrom or whirlpool, it is known as Hvergelmir, or the world's well, surrounds the polar mountain, and via 4 6-hour daily cycles of pushing and pulling through subterranean channels actually causes the rising and falling of tides on Earth. Of a sudden, they fell into that numbing ocean's dark mist which could hardly be penetrated with the eyes. And behold, the current of the fluctuating ocean whirled back to its mysterious fountainhead, and with most furious impetuosity drew the unhappy sailors, who in their despair now thought only of death, on to chaos. This is, they say, the abysmal chasm, that deep in which report has it that all the backflow of the sea, which appears to decrease, is absorbed and then in turn re-vomited, as the mounting fluctuation is usually described. So you see, it's not the moon that creates the currents or the tides. It's this well, according to these explorers. Besides the Norse legends of Hvergelmir, historical records of this world well can be found as early as the 8th century AD, when Paulus Diaconus, or Paul the Deacon, a Benedictine monk, scribe and historian of the Lombards, wrote in his Historia Langobardorum that not far from the shore, where the ocean extends without bounds, is that very deep abyss of the waters, which we commonly call the ocean's navel. It is said twice a day to suck the waves into itself and to spew them out again, as is proved to happen along all these coasts, where the waves rush in and go back again with fearful rapidity. By the whirlpool of which we have spoken, it is asserted that ships are often drawn in with such rapidity that they seem to resemble the flight of arrows through the air, and sometimes they are lost in the gulf with a very frightful destruction. Often, just as they are about to go under, they are brought back again by a sudden shock of the waves, and they are sent out again thence with the same rapidity with which they were drawn in. Not far from the islands toward the north, this is from Giraldus Cambrensis, or Gerald of Wales. He was the Archdeacon of Brecon, historian and royal clerk to King Henry II. He wrote in his work Topographia Hibernica in 1188. So these people are very well renowned. These are not just ordinary people saying this. Not far from the islands towards the north, there is an astonishing whirlpool in the sea, towards which there is a set current of the waves from all quarters, until, pouring themselves into nature's secret recesses, they are swallowed up as if it were in the abyss. Should a vessel chance to pass in that direction, it is caught and drawn along by the force of the waves, and sucked by the vortex without chance of escape. There are 4 of these whirlpools in the ocean, described by philosophers as existing in the 4 different quarters of the world, whence it has been conjectured that the currents of the sea, as well as the winds, are regulated by fixed principles. In a 12th century work, Historia Norvegiae, an anonymous Norwegian monk gives a particularly detailed description. The greatest of all whirlpools is said to be found there, which engulfs the strongest ships, sucking them in at ebb tide and spewing out their fragments with a belch at flood tide. There is a very deep abyss in the earth itself, and alongside it are open-mouthed caverns containing winds, which are said to be brought forth by the breathing of the water. And these are the breath of gales. Indeed, by their breathing, these winds draw to them the waters of the sea through hidden passages in the earth. They shut them up in the vaults of the abyss, and then by the same force drive them out again, causing sea surges, spates, and whirling of water spouts. Earthquakes also occur, and various discharges of vapor and conflagration. For when the wind's breath, held in the cheeks of the earth, presses to burst out, it shakes the foundation of the world with a dreadful roaring, and forces it to tremble. So when the wind's breath contends with fire in the earth's interior, then even mid-ocean the depths are fissured, and smoky exhalations and sulphurous flames are seen to emerge. People always understood these attributes when going near this land, particularly the magnetic mountain, like I mentioned in part 3. Mention the magnetic mountain, 4 directional rivers, and from Nicholas Delin's Inventio Fortunata, an encircling whirlpool that is said to change every 6 hours, causing the tides. And he compares them to the breath of God at the navel of the earth, inhaling and exhaling the great seas. So we see that the earth is a living being, as is mentioned in the Quran. Very extensive blog post, I must say. So when we go further down, all the way, we're going to see that the mythologies align even more so. If you thought this detail is not enough, we're going to see more. And I'll show you more of these one by one. Puranic and Sumerian traditions also refer to this place, calling it Mount Sumeru. In ancient Iran, they spoke of Mount Hara-Barazaiti, with a celestial spring on its highest peak in the realm of the stars. In early Chinese writings, there is Mount Kunlun with a bronze pillar of heaven at the summit where the immortals dwell, often also called the Pearl Mountain, a paradise home of 4 great rivers around which the heavens revolve. The Turkmen tribes of southern Turkestan told of a copper pillar that marks the navel of the earth. The Mongols wrote of Mount Sumber, with the Zambu tree on its summit. The Buryats of the Siberia talked of Mount Sumur, with the North Pole star fastened to its summit. The Siberian Dalmuks spoke of a mountain lake from which 4 rivers flow to the points of the compass. The Egyptians wrote of the mound of the first time, which was the first land to appear from the waters, and is the dwelling place of the high God, the source of light. The Muslims wrote of Qaf, and Zoroastrians wrote of Girnagar, the world encircling mountains. That's what Mount Qaf is, mountains of Qaf. I'm going to talk about that in a bit. The Navajos spoke of encircled mountain, which was surrounded by 4 directional mountains. The Dogon tribe of Nigeria told of a cosmic pillar spanning 14 worlds, which was the roof post of the house of the high god Amma. The Warao Indians of the Orinoco Delta in Venezuela speak of a cosmic axis extending above the center of their earth disk. Ancient Greek mythology referred to Mount Olympus, the home of the gods. The ancient Germans told of Irminsul, a universal column which sustains everything. The Norse Edda speaks of Asgard, the berg of the gods rising in the center of Midgard, the circular earth. Ptolemy recounted a legend involving magnetic islands which exerted such strong attraction that ships with metal nails were held in place and unable to leave. In the Arabic legend 1001 Nights, a magnetic mountain pulls all the nails right out of their ship, causing it to fall apart and sink. The second tallest mountain in Tanzania is even named Mount Meru after its primordial partner at the pole. This is illustrated by Mount Olympus of the Greeks, Mount Alborz, which in Arabic we'd call Al-Burj, of the Iranians, and Mount Kunlun of the Chinese. In Near Eastern tradition, the world mountain is a small hill in Jerusalem known as Mount Zion. Thus, the circular continent, centered on Jerusalem in medieval maps, also possessed a symbolic world mountain. That's from Richard L. Thompson, Cosmology of the Bhagavata Purana. Jerusalem was Paul, the Apostle Paul's lodestone. The ancient mariners who set sail in their little cockleshell boats tended to hug the coastline, not daring to get too far from land. Aids to navigation were few, and their vessels were at the mercy of wind and wave. The slightest sign of a storm would send them scurrying for refuge. Moreover, the dreams of those old-time venturers were haunted by thoughts of the fabled Lodestone Mountain. They believed it had the power to draw their vessels to shipwreck on its shores against all the pull of tide and wind. This is from the Bible, Exploring the Book of Acts by John Phillips. Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah from the Old Testament in the Bible, wrote about a mountain set above all other mountains in the far recesses of the north where the gods meet, called Mount Zion in Jerusalem. Genesis, Ezekiel, and Enoch all mention a paradisiacal Eden, the mountain of God and source of 4 main rivers. Genesis 2, verses 10 to 14 reads, "And a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was parted, and became into 4 heads. The name of the first is Pison, that is which compasseth the whole land of Havilah. Where there is gold, and the gold of that land is good, there is bdellium and the onyx stone. And the name of the second river is Gihon. The same is it that encompasseth the whole land of Ethiopia. And name of the third river is Hiddekel, that is it which goeth toward the east of Assyria. And the fourth river is Euphrates." Muhammad also spoke of 4 rivers and a divine tree. This is mentioned in the Quran. There's in chapter 47 called Surah Muhammad, there are 4 rivers of Jannah mentioned and their attributes. There's also many divine trees in the Quran, but we'll save that for the next chapter. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, 4 branches of the celestial Ganges flow out from Brahmapuri on top of Mount Sumeru. In ancient Canaan, Guri Ili, the mountain of El, was the dwelling of El, the creator, and a place of assembly for the demigods. In one Phoenician ivory carving from around 1000 BC, a deity is shown dressed to represent a mountain with 4 streams coming out from the mountain god-man at right angles. Similarly, in an ancient Akkadian hymn to the goddess Ishtar, she is addressed as the queen of the mountain of the world and queen of the land of the 4 rivers of Erech. And she says, "I am lord of the steep mountains which tremble whilst their summits reach to the firmament." In the Christian apocryphal book of Enoch, Enoch is taken by angels on a tour of the 7 heavens, and while in the 3rd heaven shown magnificent trees producing wonderful fruits with adjacent springs pumping honey, milk, oil, and wine to 4 directional rivers flowing down into paradisiacal Eden, an abode specially prepared only for the pious and selfless. Similarly, in the Hindu cosmology, 4 trees in Ilavrtavarsa stand on great mountains producing rivers of nectar and honey, like fountains of youth providing health and vitality to all who drink of them, whilst the central tallest Jambu tree rises to incredible heights and seems to cover all the heavens. In the Bhagavata Purana, Mount Sumeru is surrounded by 4 great mountains, surmounted by 4 gigantic trees. These include the Jambu tree, after which Jambudvipa is named. 4 huge lakes of milk, honey, sugarcane juice, and pure water are located between the 4 mountains, and these lakes confer mystic powers on the celestial beings who bathe in them. There are also 4 celestial gardens near these lakes. From the foot of each of the 4 trees there flows a river that either emerges from the tree itself or from the fruits of the tree. The rivers of honey and different kinds of juice flow throughout the region of the Ilavartavarsa, surrounding Mount Sumeru, and they confer freedom from fatigue, disease, and old age on the inhabitants of that region. So you see, these springs are not necessarily just water, exactly what the Quran says. Honey, wine, water, milk. The Yakut people of northeastern Siberia have their own strikingly similar ancient myth, where a world tree of an immeasurable age exists at the navel of the earth, just like the Hindu Jambu tree is born of the umbilical knot of Brahma. The Yakut world tree reaches into the high heavens with cones 9 fathoms long and sap which imparts youthfulness on all who consume it. Near the Yakut tree also lies a lake of sweet milk. Imagine how big those pine cones are. In different traditions, the upper and lower worlds may be divided into several levels, often 7 or 9. In the center of the earth disk there is a world mountain or world pillar that links Middle Earth to the lower and upper worlds. The world mountain represents the polar axis, and the dwellings of great demigods are located on its summit. The world mountain may be surrounded by other mountains that define the cardinal directions, and these directions may be associated with certain colors. 4 sacred rivers may also flow from the world mountain in the 4 cardinal directions. There is a world tree that is often situated on the world mountain, or 4 world trees may be located on the neighboring directional mountains. The world tree extends from the earth to the heavens, and it is nearly immortal. It is the source of rivers of nectar or pure water that give health and longevity to those who drink them. The tree stands in an earthly paradise where there are celestial gardens and rivers of various substances such as milk, oil, and honey. The tree or world pillar is often associated with a giant eagle-like bird that is the enemy of great serpents dwelling in the lower world. In ancient Iranian thought, a mountain called Hara Berezaiti or Al-Barj stands at the center of the earth, a fixed point around which the sun, moon, and stars revolve. At its summit lies the dwelling place of Ormuzd, the Lord of Light, complete with a giant miraculous tree, an Edenic garden of Ahura Mazda, and the celestial fountain Arduisur, which is the mother of all earthly water and flows down towards 4 cardinal points into 4 large streams. The bridge Jinvad reaches from the peak of Al-Burj to the solid vault of heaven, or Gorodman, the home of the pious and blessed, whilst underneath lies the great gulf of Duzak, the abysmal abode of the Lord of Darkness, Ahriman. In the beginning, Izanagi and Izanani in Japanese mythology, the great god and goddess standing in heaven, drove a celestial spear into the endless sea and twisted it around until an island arose from the water. They then descended from heaven to earth and built a palace around the huge spear, using it as the central pillar, a palace. This spear became the central axis of the world, and their palace the birthplace of the human race. In the Kojiki and Shinto religion, the Creator and the North Pole are so purposely and inseparably linked that one of the often used names of God translates to the Lord of the center of heaven. The Ainu people, who are supposedly the first inhabitants of the islands of Japan, whose name means, literally, offspring of the centered. They are believed to have arrived onto the archipelago from the north and bury their dead facing north, to which their ancestors, where their ancestors came, and to which their spirits would return. So you see, even the word in Arabic makes perfect sense why they're called Ainu, because Ain means spring, and this place is littered with springs, holy springs. In Buddhist funeral ceremonies, bodies are cremated in special crematoria, actually called maru, which are essentially tall stone pillars with 4 doors at the peak aligned to the cardinal directions, with the belief that our reincarnated souls will pass Mount Meru before returning to earthly bodies. Literally every temple and the little spirit house shrines found in most Buddhist homes are also representations of this Meru, the abode of the gods, aligned to the 4 cardinal directions and opulently embellished with gold, jewelry, and metaphysical artwork. So they can't even imagine a different type of place that would be at the center of their religion. Ancient South American traditions also believe the human race was birthed in the farthest north, upon the highest of mountains, surrounded by perpetual clouds, fountainhead of the world's waters and home of god Tlaloc, residing on their sacred paradise mountain Tlapalan. Notice how many of these places have Allah in the word: Shangri-La, Shambhala, Valhalla, Uppsala, Tlapalan. I can go on and on. Cibola. These are all names of places. Valhalla. The first man, Quetzalcoatl, was said to have drank the water of immortality from Tlaloc's mountain and ruled as king throughout the Golden Age in Mexico. The many Incan, Mayan, Aztec, and other steppe pyramids and temples aligned to cardinal directions and devoted to the gods are representative of this world mountain. Similarly, in ancient Chinese Taoist tradition, a myth over 4,000 years old refers to Shangte, the highest of all gods who lives in said way, described as a celestial space above the North Pole. Shangte's abode is said to exist directly over the peak of Mount Kunlun, which again places the highest god at Polaris. As with other cosmologies, Mount Kunlun is a primeval paradise, abode of the gods, with a world tree in the middle, and a fountain of immortality from which 4 rivers flow outwards to the 4 corners of the earth. Are you starting to get the message? I mean, as monotonous as I sound right now, I simply want to show you how dense all of these hadith, all of these legends, asatir min awwaliin, agree upon the same origin of the human race. Exactly where, in the previous parts of this series, we've pointed to Mecca. Okay? Even the word Shang, doesn't that sound a bit like Sham, the north? Sparkling fountains and purling streams contain the far-famed ambrosia. One may there rest on flowery carpeted swards, listening to the melodious warbling of birds, or feasting upon the delicious fruits, at once fragrant and luscious, which hang from the branches of the luxuriant groves. Whatever there is beautiful in landscape or grand in nature may also be found there in the highest state of perfection. All is charming, all is enchanting, and whilst nature smiles, the company of genies delight the ravished visitor. Where now is this paradise mountain located? At the North Pole. This is the altar of heaven. Always, in accordance with this conception, the emperor and his assistants, when they officiate before the altar of heaven, they always face north. The pole star itself is a prominent object of worship in ancient times. Both the ancient Orientals and Greeks turned to face north before commencing prayer. Homer states that when addressing the gods of Mount Olympus, they would stretch their arms toward the northern sky, and Plato also confirms that this holy habitation of Zeus was placed in the center of the world. Heraclitus says that it touches the ether and casts a shadow 5,000 stadia in length. That's like 1,000 kilometers. I think it's like hundreds of kilometers. Herodotus stated the mountain to be very tapering and round, so lofty, moreover, that the top cannot be seen, the clouds never quitting it either summer or winter. The natives call this mountain the Pillar of Heaven, and they themselves take their name from it, being called Atlantes. They are reported not to eat any living thing. Strabo claimed it was an earthly paradise with gigantic olive trees and grape clusters a cubit in length. That's a couple meters. Pliny described a river of milk descending from great heights, and he called the mountain a fabulosissimum. Maximus Tyrius claimed the ocean waves stopped short before reaching the mountain, standing up like a wall around its base, though unrestrained by any earthly barrier. Nothing but the air and the sacred thicket, right, like al-Eika, prevent the water from reaching the mountain. In the Phaedo, Socrates is quoted as saying, "All things that grow trees and flowers and fruit are fairer than any here, and there are hills and stones in them smoother and more transparent and fairer in color than our highly valued emeralds and sardonyx and jaspers and other gems, which are but minute fragments of them, for there all the stones are like our precious stones and fairer still. The temperament of their seasons is such that the inhabitants have no disease and live much longer than we do, and have sight and hearing and smell and all the other senses in much greater perfection. And they have temples and sacred places in which the gods really dwell, and they hear their voices and receive their answers, and are conscious of them and hold converse with them. And they see the sun, the moon, and the stars as they really are." Do you see the picture now that the Quran is describing this exact garden? The evidence that in ancient Hellenic thought, also the heaven of the gods was in the northern sky is incidental, but cumulative and satisfactory. For example, heaven is upheld by Atlas, but the terrestrial station of Atlas, as we have elsewhere shown, is at the North Pole. Again, Olympus was the abode of the gods, but if the now generally current etymology of this term is correct, Olympus was simply the Atlantean pillar, pictured as a lofty mountain and supporting the sky at its northern pole. In fact, many writers now affirm that the Olympus of Greek mythology was simply originally the North Polar world mountain of the Asiatic nations. The ancient Germanic and Finnish people also, when praying or sacrificing to the gods, always faced north. And in the Scandinavian Eddas, both Asgard and Idavolar are represented as the navel or center of the world. For them, atop the Yggdrasil tree at Earth's center was the heavenly Asgard, home of the gods. Today we still pay respect to this primitive tradition at Christmas when we top our symbolic world trees with a bright yellow pole star. We've already seen that the term navel was anciently used in many languages for center, and that the pole or center point of the revolving constellations was the navel of heaven. But as to the celestial pole, there corresponds a terrestrial one. So it is only natural that to the term the navel of heaven there should be corresponding expression, the navel of the earth. Beginning with Christian traditions, let us make a pilgrimage to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre at Jerusalem. There, in the portion belonging to the Greek Christians, we shall discover a round pillar, some 2 feet high, projecting from the marble pavement but supporting nothing. If we inquire as to its purpose, we shall be informed that it is designed to mark the exact center or navel of the earth. Early pilgrims and chroniclers refer to this curious monument, but its antiquity no one knows. The oldest epic in the world, that of Izdubar, fragments of which we have survived in the oldest literature of Babylon. These fragments show that the earliest inhabitants of the Tigris-Euphrates basin located a center of the earth not in their own midst, but in a far-off land of sacred associations where the holy house of the gods is situated, a land into the heart whereof man hath not penetrated, a place underneath the overshadowing world tree and beside the full waters. No description could more perfectly identify the spot with the Arctic pole of ancient Asiatic mythology. Yet this testimony stands not alone, for in the fragment of another ancient text translated by Sayce in Records of the Past, we are told of a dwelling which the gods created for the first human beings, a dwelling in which they became great and increased in numbers, and the location of which is described in words exactly corresponding to those of Iranian, Indian, Chinese, Eddaic, and Aztec literature, namely in the center of the earth. You can also see where this symbol comes from now, what it actually means, what this circumambulation symbol actually means, and why it's been banned from pretty much anywhere in the world. Among the ancient Inca subjects of Peru was found the same idea of a navel of the earth, and even among the Chickasaws of Mississippi. Thus is all ancient thought full of this legendary idea of a mysterious, primeval, holy, paradisiac earth center, a spot connected as is no other with the center of heaven, the paradise of God. Why it should be so no one has ever told us, but the hypothesis that places the biblical Eden at the pole and makes all later earth navels commemorative of that primal one affords a perfect explanation. Well, the explanation is they want to lie to you. In the light of it, there is no difficulty in understanding that the earth center in Jerusalem with which we began. You can see very clearly what they are trying to hide from us. Even in Freemasonic aprons, you can see similar symbolism pointing to these concepts. A flat earth framed by pillars covered by an arch firmament, often with the tallest or most prominent pillar positioned centrally and a single eye representing Polaris situated above it. The sun and moon are also usually shown on either side, representing their positions over and around the flat earth. It is plain that this idea of a lofty central primeval mountain belonged to the undivided human race. I have no doubt that the idea of a central mountain and of the rivers flowing from it and the abode of the gods upon its summit is a primitive myth derived from the earliest traditions of our race. And so this is the introduction that I want to show you once I go a bit deeper into the specifics of our world. So you can appreciate every single people, nation, culture, religion, sect of religion, all agree and remember this one central homeland. Many mythological cosmologies included an axis mundi, the central axis of a flat earth that connects the earth, heavens, and other realms together. In religion and mythology, the axis mundi, the cosmic axis, world pillar, columna carolui, the center of the world, it's a point described as the center of the world that connects between it, heaven and earth. The ancient Greeks regarded several sites as the places of Earth's omphalos, or navel stone. Notably at the Oracle of Delphi, while still maintaining a belief in a cosmic world tree and in a Mount Olympus as the abode of the gods. Judaism has the Temple Mount and Mount Sinai. Christianity has the Mount of Olives and Calvary Hill. Islam has Mecca, said to be the place on earth that was created first, and the Temple Mount, or Dome of the Rock, from whence Muhammad ascended the seven heavens. In Shintoism, the Isa shrine is the omphalos, or navel. In addition to the Kunlun Mountains, where it is believed the peach tree of immortality located, the Chinese folk religion recognizes 4 other specific mountains as pillars of the world. In medieval times, some Christians thought of Jerusalem as the center of the world, the umbilicus mundi, the navel. The center is well defined in a flat earth model. A flat earth would have a definite geographic center. There would also be a unique point at the exact center of a spherical firmament or a firmament that was a half sphere. The Milky Way's galactic center as a center of the universe. Remember in Hinduism and Chinese folk religion how they talk about the Milky Way? Before the 1920s, it was generally believed that there were no galaxies other than the Milky Way. This is also relating to the center of the universe. Then we get this idea from Eastern religions like Hinduism of loka or loci, basically the realms as they are. So this literally means planet or plane of the universe. In Hindu literature, the 3 worlds refer to either the earth called Bhuloka, the heaven called Svarga, and hell called Naraka, like Nar in Arabic, or the earth Bhuloka, heaven Svarga, and another world called Patala. So it's ambiguous what the underworld is. In Bhuloka is described to be split up into 7 regions referred to as islands or dvipas. These regions are known as Jambudvipa, Blakshadvipa, Shalmaladvipa, Kushadvipa, Goronchadvipa, Shakadvipa, and Pushkaradvipa. A land where the fruits of one's actions allows one passage into either Svarga or Naraka. So there is some kind of a way that we can go between these worlds, right? And wouldn't you know, our world and the center of our world is in the navel of this anthropomorphic conception of these worlds. Again, the navel. And the earth is represented as a person. In Vedic mythology, Svarga is filled with the nectar of immortality, Amrit, with lakes containing lotuses, pools of wine, milk, and ghee, as well as streams that are replete with honey. So this is actually the heavenly realm above our heads. Okay. They are regarded as 14 lokas, 7 higher ones and 7 lower ones. Wow, interesting. This is kind of like the 7 heavens. And they are the like of them of the earth. This is all from the Quran. It's so obvious. Okay. In Jainism, although loka means originally open space, Jain teachers prefer to derive it from the verbal root lok, which means to see. Now we're going to talk about this stairway and descent from heavens and the earth in the next part, inshallah. Urdhvaloka is the realms of the gods or heavens. Madhyaloka, where we live, the realms of the humans, animals, and plants. And Adholoka, the realms of the hellish beings or the infernal regions. This is the base prerequisite knowledge to have for this presentation. That brings us to the world tree, the central axis of what it is. So I've already talked about these ideas partially in part 3 of my videos. The world tree is basically this colossal tree which supports the heavens and thereby connects the heavens, the terrestrial world, and through its roots the underworld, those 3 lokas. It is strongly connected to the motif of the tree of life, but it is the source of wisdom of the ages. Specific world trees include Egig Erofa in Hungarian mythology. We also have the world tree or cosmic tree associated with an eagle and a serpent. The world tree is identified with the tree of life and fulfills the axis of the worlds. It's at the center of the world and represents order and harmony of the cosmos. Did you know this tree is actually mentioned in the Quran? I'm going to show you that, inshallah. Each part of the tree corresponds to one of the 3 spheres of the world. Treetops, the heavens, trunk, the middle of the world, and the earth, the roots of the underworld. So basically, if you were to draw this, okay, today, if you were to go to the North Pole and see this today, all you would see of this tree is the trunk. That's how big it is, okay? And that is mentioned in the Quran. You can find where that is mentioned. Its branches are said to reach the skies, and its roots connect to the human or earthly world with an underworld or subterranean realm. Because of this, the tree was worshipped as a mediator between heavens and earth. The treetops on them are located the luminaries or stars and heavenly bodies. Along with an eagle's nest, several species of birds perch among its branches. Humans and animals of every kind live underneath its branches, and near the root is the dwelling place of snakes and every sort of reptile. The bird perches atop its foliage, often a winged mythical creature that represents a heavenly realm. Eagle is basically the most frequent of these birds, and the snake or serpent or dragon at its roots. The water of life may also flow from the roots of the trees. It functions as a separator between earth and the skies, holding up the ladder. Sometimes it's located on a mountain. So some species of birds like an eagle, raven, crane, loon, or lark are seen as mediators or messengers between these worlds. The snake is the counterpart in the lower regions. We also see associations with a horse and deer antlers, which might resemble tree branches. The Temple of the Cross complex at Palenque contains one of the most studied examples of the world tree. I've already mentioned the indigenous examples of this. Many indigenous American peoples located in more temperate regions, for example, it is the spruce rather than the ceiba that is the world tree. The sacred tree of Zeus is the oak. So obviously the species changes, right? When people move to different locations, they just pick a really massive tree for them that they imagine fulfills this criteria. The oak tree connects the heavens above, and its roots grow into the earth to reach the depths of Tartarus. So, interestingly enough, the Greeks call the olive tree Moriae. We've already talked about Moria in the 3rd part of this series as Marwa or Muria. Okay? And very interestingly enough, there's an olive tree mentioned in the Quran as well. The Hesperides live beneath an apple tree with golden apples. And this tree stands in the garden of the Hesperides, guarded by a dragon called Ladan. Hanging on a tree guarded by a never-sleeping dragon, a serpent gliding from the Caucasus Mountains appears and coils around the grove as to protect it. In Roman mythology, the world tree was the olive tree and was associated with Pax, which means peace. Greek equivalent of Pax is Irene, one of the Hurai. The sacred tree of the Roman sky father Jupiter was the oak. The laurel was the sacred tree of Apollo. An ancient fig tree in the Comitium at Rome was considered a descendant of the very tree under which Romulus and Remus were found. The only reason I'm giving you all these details is because soon enough, inshallah, we're going to put them all together with what the Quran mentions. It mentions a fig tree, an olive tree. It mentions a nakhla. It mentions all kinds of different things in the Quran, the mountains. the bees, and we're going to reconstruct, inshallah, what this place is. In Norse mythology, we have Yggdrasil, an immense ash tree that is central, considered very holy. This is where the Aesir go to hold their courts. Its branches extend far into the heavens. The tree is supported by 3 roots that extend far away into other locations. One to the well Urla Brunner of the heavens, one to the spring Vergelmir, and another to the well Mimisbrunner. Creatures live within Yggdrasil, including the worm Nidhager, which is a dragon. This is related to the sacred tree at Uppsala, the temple of the ancient Vikings. Baltic mythology, there's an image of an inverted tree growing with its roots up and branches going into the ground. So, again, it's always this tripartite division. Heaven, earth, hell. Hell, earth, heaven. And this tree holds them all up. Again, the species changes, but the same myths are seen across all cultures. We have a bird and we have a dragon, okay? Even on the Mexican flag, there's a serpent and an eagle on a cactus as well. So basically, I'm going to talk about a lot more of this in detail, but I just want to give you kind of an oversight that this world tree is just everywhere, okay? Armenian mythology, Georgian mythology, Hittite culture. This is not something that's fake. It's mentioned in the Quran, and it's given weight by these legends of the former peoples as an axis mundi. Hinduism, North Asian, Siberian cultures. Okay. Mongolic and Turkic folk beliefs. It's all over these different Bashkir, Kazakh tribes, Mongolic tribes. Korea, China, Tanzania. Okay, the details change, but the facts, the general ideas remain the same. This is connected to the tree of life. This is mentioned in the Bible. It's alluded to in the Quran as well. So the source of the earthly hauma plant in Iranian mythology is a shining white tree that grows on a paradisiacal mountain. Okay? Sprigs of this white hauma tree were brought to earth by divine birds. The tree is considerably diverse. I've already mentioned similar things to this about Hinduism. This tree also appears in the beliefs of Jainism. So where people live long lifespans because of the nature of the fruits and the springs, with their effects on human biology. The tree of life first appears in Genesis 2:9 and 3:22, the source of eternal life in the Garden of Eden, from which access is revoked when man is driven from the garden. Predominantly in the last chapter of that book, as a part of the new Garden of Paradise, access is then no longer forbidden for those who wash their robes. The tree of life is promised as a reward to those who overcome. Pure river of water of life which proceeds out of the throne of God. The river seems to feed 2 trees of life, one on either side of the river, which bear 12 manner of fruits, and the leaves of the tree were for healing of the nations. You have this Chinese example here. There's a dragon at the bottom. Okay, there's birds on the top. And this links heaven and hell. Heaven and earth. Okay? Earth is in the center. There's all kinds of planes of existence here. In Manichaeism, the tree of life helped Adam obtain knowledge necessary for salvation. In Greek mythology, we have golden apples, sort of like a forbidden fruit. This is why we usually depict the forbidden fruit of the Garden of Eden story as apples from Greek mythology. The alchemists regarded the tree of life with the elixir of life and the philosopher's stone, which can help expand life, extend your life, right? In Georgia, the Borjgali is an ancient Georgian tree of life symbol. And it looks like the symbol that's banned for the Western world at the moment. It looks exactly like that spiral, that tawaf symbol, and the whirlpool at that place as well. In Islam, the tree of immortality is the tree of life motif as it appears in the Quran. Okay? They've even woven this into carpets as well. It's everywhere. So Jewish sources have this tree of life as well. Mesoamerican cultures. In North America, the Iroquois believe the world on the turtle's back explains the origin of the land in which a tree of life is described. So according to the myth, it's found in the heavens where the first humans lived until a pregnant woman fell and landed in an endless sea. They were saved by a giant turtle from drowning, and she formed the world on its back by planting bark taken from the tree. They call this tree Grandmother Cedar. In the Black Elk and Lakota Sioux traditions, we have a story about someone who's brought to a center of a hoop, okay, axis mundi, where he sees the tree in full leaf and bloom, and the chief stands against the tree. The Oneida tribes say that the supernatural beings lived in the sky world above the waters which cover the earth. This tree was covered with fruits which gave them their light, and they were instructed that no one should cut into the tree, otherwise a great punishment would be given. The Serer religion of Africa regard the tree of life and formed it as the basis of their cosmogony. Trees were the first things created on earth by the supreme being in their religion called Rug. Thus, it's not the only tree of life in Serer society, but a symbol of immortality. Again, we see this tree of life connecting the upper world, the middle world, the underworld, it being a sacred tree that is an axis mundi. All right? The tree of knowledge of good and evil is the other side of that coin. Some have argued it's just another name for the tree of life. Most sources agree it's a fig tree. Okay, there is a fig tree in the Qur'an as well. Augustine of Hippo, the great scholar of Catholicism, taught the tree should be understood both symbolically and as a real tree, similarly to Jerusalem being both a real city and a figure of heavenly Jerusalem. He underlined that the tree and its fruits were not evil by themselves because everything that God creates was good. Okay, it was the disobedience of Adam and his wife. According to the Bible, nothing shows that the forbidden fruit of the tree of knowledge was necessarily an apple. The Quran never refers to the tree as the tree of knowledge of good and evil, but rather symbolically refers to it as the tree of immortality. God created Adam and Eve. He told them that they could enjoy everything in the garden except this of the tree. And so Shaitan appeared to them, telling them the only reason God forbade them to eat from the tree was that they would become angels or immortal. Okay? Same idea in Islam, in the Quran. In Norse mythology, Yggdrasil is probably the most famous iteration of this, and around it exists all else, including the 9 worlds of the universe. It's an immense tree considered to be very holy, central to the cosmos. The gods go to it daily to assemble at their governing assemblies. The branches extend far into the heavens. The tree is supported by 3 roots extending far into the other locations. Creatures live within it, such as an eagle and a dragon called Nidhogr. Accepted definition is that it actually means Odin's horse. What do you do with a horse? You go and travel on a horse, right? It also means gallows as well, because apparently there's a crucifixion or hanging story. Watch my video Companions of the Cave Part 2 for more information. And that this Yggdrasil would mean the world tree upon which the horse of the highest God is bound. Almost like if it's a spiritual pathway into the heavens. We'll talk about this in the next part. So Yggdrasil is the biggest and best of all the trees. Its branches extend out over all of the world and reach out over all of the sky. So 3 of its roots support it, and these 3 roots extend extremely far. One is among the Aesir, the second among the frost giants, and the third over Niflheim, basically where hell is. And this is gnawed at by the dragon Nidhogr. And beneath this root is the spring Hvergilmir, which we already said is a whirlpool, right? So beneath that root is the well of Mimisbrunner, has the wisdom and intelligence contained in it. And basically at Urdarbrunner, this very holy well beneath this root, The gods hold their court, and every day the Aesir ride to Urdarbrummer up the rainbow bridge called the Bifrost. The dew falls from Yggdrasil to the earth, explaining that this is what people call honeydew, and from it the bees feed. Exactly in the Quran, as Quran says, "O bees, take your residence in the trees and the mountains and that which they construct." Okay, where do you think that is? It's unclear where the 9 worlds are located in relation to the tree. They could exist either one above the other or perhaps be grouped around the tree. There are references to worlds existing beneath the tree, while the gods are pictured as this in the sky, a rainbow bridge or bifrost connecting the tree with the other worlds. So this tree is a pathway, as much as it is an axis, as much as it is a pole. The conception of the tree rising through a number of worlds is found in northern Eurasia and forms part of the shamanic lore shared by many peoples of this region. It seems to be a very ancient conception, perhaps based on the pole star, the center of the heavens, and the image of the central tree in Scandinavia may have been influenced by it. Among Siberian shamans, a central tree may be used as a ladder to ascend the heavens. Holt should not be understood literally as a wood or even a forest in which the two keep themselves hidden. These are the 2 Adam and Eve characters called Líf and Lífþrasir. But rather as an alternative name for the world tree Yggdrasil. Thus, the creation of mankind from tree trunks is repeated after the Ragnarok as well. Remember, Firaun says, "I will crucify you in the trunks of the Nakhil," right? So there's something going on inside the trunks of these trees. That's how vast they are, right? So we have this mention of a sacred tree in Uppsala. Again, sounds like very similar to Uppsala, Allah in there. An ash tree is often what it's, but they're unclear what species this is. We're going to find this on later. The description of the tree and location of a well nearby are reminiscent of the evergreen Yggdrasil. Notice it's an evergreen tree, which stood above the well of Urd. And basically they created a copy of the world of their Norse gods at Uppsala. So this is like a temple, a very profound temple where sacrifices were made, and there's a tree right next to it, right by it. Okay. There's also a very holy spring there as well. Then we have the Germanic pagans. Okay. They have Irminsul, which literally means great pillar. Remember, this tree is so big, you're only going to see its trunk because the branches are in the heaven, above the firmament. The roots are underneath the earth. So, of course, people would come back saying, "Oh, this big pillar." That's how they're going to remember it. A church was erected on its place in 783 by Pope Leo III. Oldest chronicle describing an Irminsul refers to it as a tree trunk erected in the open air, even though it's called a pillar. So pillar and tree are used interchangeably in these myths. Irminsul means great pillar in Old Saxon. It's cognate with the terms of some significance in elsewhere in mythology. It's literally analogous to Ygr, one of the names of Odin, and Yggdrasil, the cosmic tree. Basically, there's a great serpent around it as well. Jörmungandr, one of the dragons. In the Teutoburg forest, it was said to have been, and it states that the original name for the region, Osning, may have meant holy wood. We have an entire production company called Hollywood, built around the same idea, holy wood, Hollywood. Irminsul was a great wooden pillar erected and worshipped beneath the open sky, and that its name, Irminsul, signifies a universal, all-sustaining pillar. So you can see in part 4 why Hollywood is constantly talking about this place, because it's literally named after it. Okay? They just hide things in plain sight. So sacred groves are mentioned in the Quran. We have them as Mash'ar al-Haram. And we also have the idea of Ashab al-Aika, which is a wood as well, a thicket. In the Yoruba religion, it is associated with its creation myth. What? This is the This is the page on oil palms, a type of palm tree. Now, interestingly enough, I'm going to show you later on that palm trees are not actually trees. So when you see palm trees in the Quran, think to yourself, how is this a palm tree? How is this the word palm tree when it's been established that palm tree is not a true tree? It's basically a tall grass, okay? There's no mention of dates in the Quran anywhere, whether it's ajwi or it's tamar. It's not mentioned there. Even in Hebrew, the word for palm tree is tamarim, okay? So, that has to be a different tree, first and foremost. And they've just, superimposed an Arabic, Middle Eastern kind of landscape over the Quran. So you think that's where it happened. So they believe oil palms, because they live in an area where they harvest oil palms, the Yoruba in Nigeria. The first tree that Obatala finds descending to earth, it's also believed that it has Orun Mila's axis mundi, connecting heaven and earth. Oil palm fronds often mark areas of sacred religious importance or incorporated into traditional Orisha garment. Its kernels are also prepared as a tool of receiving Orun Mila's words. Okay, so to them it was a palm tree. To the Norse it was an ash tree. To the Mesoamericans it was a ceiba tree, okay, or some other kind of tree. Has the 4 cardinal directions. Look at how they depicted it. The 4 cardinal directions. Doesn't that look like a cross? Doesn't that look like other types of crosses? What you would call in German Hakenkreuz, okay, or a swastika in Sanskrit. It has a quadripartite concept. They often have birds in their branches, water monsters or dragons in their roots. The central world tree has also been interpreted as a representation of the band of the Milky Way. Why do they call it the Milky Way? Why is it called milky? Because the word galactos means milk in Greek. And why is it a way? You have to wonder if you see that in the night sky, what that actually is. Okay. The religious fig, the sacred fig, this is not in the Bible. I'm not talking about the Bible. I'm not talking about the Quran. I'm talking about Hinduism. Did you know that the sacred Buddha in Buddhism is believed to have attained enlightenment under a fig tree? Of all the trees in the jungles of India, the fig tree is the one where he attained enlightenment, knowledge, tree of knowledge, okay? The Jains, the Hindus, the Buddhists, the Sikhs all consider this species to be sacred, and they often meditate under the fig tree. The sacred fig or sycamore. Sadhus, Hindu ascetics, meditate beneath sacred fig trees, okay? Hindus do pradakshina, circumambulation or meditative pacing around the sacred fig tree as a mark of worship. Circumambulation around fig trees, have you ever heard of this in Hinduism? That's what they do. Usually 7 times, exactly like Muslims around the Kaaba, are done in the tree in the morning time, chanting Vriksha Rajaya Namah, meaning salutation to the king of trees. Isn't Allah called Malik al-Mulk, the king of kings, the king of all kingdoms, the king of everything? This is what they're talking about. And this is Hinduism. Okay? Then we have Hungarian mythology. Egi Erufa, that literally means sky-high tree. It's also called Elitfa, meaning tree of life, or Vilagfa, world tree. Tetayetlinfa, tree without a top. So you're only seeing the trunk. It's an element of Hungarian shamanism and native faith, and a typical element of Hungarian folk art and folk tales, and also a distinct folktale type. The Taltosok shamans are the humans who are entitled to climb up the Egig Erefa and wander in the 7 or 9 layers of the sky. It's a stairway. It often carries among its branches the sun and the moon. The tree often stands on the world mountain. Are you starting to see a picture, right? Mountain, tree, hell, roots, branches, sky, bird, dragon, ladder, stairway. Its top is in the sky, its roots are in hell, where snakes and toads live, reptiles. In the tails, birds often sit on the trees, for example, eagles or the mythical Hungarian bird, turul. Turul is like the most famous bird of Hungarian mythology. I've seen this statue with my eyes. The legend is this bird brought the Hungarians to their homeland. Okay, that tells you everyone has a legend of being in an exodus as well, like Beni Israel. The tree that reached the sky is a Hungarian ethnic tale, associated with the prehistoric shamanistic religion of ancient Hungarians and their linguistic kindred. Remember, Hungarian is language that's related to Estonian language, the far north, the Baltic region. A hero climbing a giant tree and arriving at a hidden upper realm. The Christmas tree. Everybody has known of this concept. Why? So interestingly, this species is pretty much always, doesn't matter if you are in Thailand, doesn't matter if you are in India, doesn't matter if you are in China, doesn't matter if you are in Africa, they will always have a Christmas tree as this evergreen conifer, either spruce, pine, or fir. Okay? And it was traditionally decorated with these qala'id, or, tinsel garlands, as well as fruits, apples, okay, sweetmeats, roses made of colored paper, and these garlands would all lead up to the top, where you would usually place an angel or a star. Doesn't that tell you what's at the very top? The angel would represent the angel Gabriel, and the star of Bethlehem, respectively, the nativity. Notice I already mentioned on a video called The Tariq, you can find on Endgame Islam channel, that this star of Bethlehem is just like a comet. That's how they used to depict it. So you can just look at that video for more information. Doesn't this look like a pillar? The Vatican Christmas tree is a really big, obvious pillar. You can look at this in 2007. They don't even hide that it's supposed to be a pillar of Axis Mundi. Okay? Modern Christmas trees have been related to the tree of paradise. Did you know that? And medieval mystery plays that were given on the 24th of December commemorate the name day of Adam and Eve in various countries. In such plays, a tree is decorated with apples, representing the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Like the Christmas crib, we have a Mahdi mentioned as well. The paradise tree was later placed in homes. Fir trees decorated with apples served as the central prop for the paradise play. Notice, fir trees don't even have apples. Okay? Why would they choose that one? These props were called paradise trees, and some researchers believe they were the forerunners of the Christmas tree. The use of evergreen trees, wreaths, and garlands to symbolize eternal life was a custom of the ancient Egyptians, Chinese, Hebrews, not even the Vikings. Okay? Tree worship was common among pagan Europeans, survived conversion to Christianity. Okay? They would set up a tree to scare away the devil for the birds during Christmas time. Notice how it would point towards the heaven. Okay? The trees were typically decorated with walnuts, golden apples, carobs, and candles. Why candles? Isn't that dangerous? Well, they understood very perfectly. This is, I think, Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. Okay? They are one of the few that popularized this in the 1800s for most homes. And the candles obviously represent the stars. That's what's in its branches, right? Notice how this evergreen looks like it has planes in it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay? And we will be the seventh one, the table, right? So you can see that there's something to this, right? Look at the examples of these trees. Doesn't this look like a pillar? Doesn't this look like a dome over this pillar? This is in Milan. Okay, always a star, a pole star at the top. Whoops. This is in Italy. Another one in Italy. Lithuania. This is like, it looks like some kind of enshroudment. UK, Trafalgar Square. They even put a pillar next to it just to show you. This is in Finland. This is in Germany. Budapest, Portugal. Madrid, Poland. Stockholm, Switzerland. Russia. New Mexico. You're going to tell me all of these governments, local and state governments, are going to spend all this money just so we can have some pretty lights once a year? Or are they keeping something up, some old tradition that they know about? A real one. Remember I told you about the maypole? It represents Polaris. Sun and the moon are the circles. They put garlands around it. There's a dance around it as well. Look how the people are joining hands around it. Just like, the Who's of Whoville and Dr. Seuss. Just like the tawaf circle thing around it. All of our circle dances, whether it's, from Greece or Lebanon or Scotland or Hungary, they're all based around this. These maypoles were erected simply as signs that the happy season of warmth and comfort had returned. Their shape allowed for garlands to be hung from them and were first seen. Okay? These are villagers lifting a very tall wooden maypole into place. You're going to see so many things, even Scottish people have the Highland Games where they carry a pole as well. It just so bizarre. How do we come up with this of our own accord unless it means something in the end? The maypole is one example. Some scholars classify maypoles as symbols of the world axis. One theory holds that they were a remnant of the Germanic reverence for sacred trees, as there is evidence for various sacred trees and wooden pillars that were venerated by the pagans, including Thor's oak and Irminsul. Okay? So, go a bit more here. You see, they know it's a trunk. They know there's some kind of garlanding around it. Okay? This is a midsummer pole in Finland. All right? These would represent luminaries, like the sun and the moon. All right? They raise it. This is where the cross comes from. It crosses the worlds, Here they are doing this dance. They're going around it, circumambulating around. This is 1941 in Wales. Okay? These people were not pagans at the time. And you could say this is a pagan tradition. And this is worldwide. This is worldwide. This is in, not sure where this is, Lustlake. Okay? In Devon, England. These traditions are all over the place. Okay? We have to pay attention to this. Does this not look like a canopy? Okay? Where is this? This is a Freemasonic version of it. Okay? Yeah, it just goes on and on. This is in Quebec, Canada. The kids understood this. All right? And yeah, they can participate in something wrong, but this is just one example. The Native Americans were somewhat obsessed with totem poles. They would put birds in them. They would put whales on the bottom, great sea dragons, consisting of poles, posts, or pillars carved with symbols or figures, usually made from large trees like red cedar, First Nations and peoples of the Pacific Northwest coast especially. Okay, there are peoples on the northwest of Canada that are called Makkah. Okay, I can show you that in the description of this video. Pole carvings may include animals, fish, plants, insects, and humans, or they may represent supernatural beings such as the thunderbird. We already said that the raven, eagle, this is what they put on the top. They know there's some kind of messenger bird. There's a raven in the Quran called Al-Ghurab. And who does he talk to? The sons of Adam. Okay? The one that slew his brother. The raven is in the Quran. All right? We have the birds also in the Quran. It's not an accident. Okay? There's all kinds of things. These totem poles are such a long, enigmatic history. And look at this one. This is actually the U.S. 50th Infantry Regiment coat of arms with a totem pole arrangement of a U.S. American eagle. Doesn't look like that at all, by the way. And a Russian bear. Transfer of ownership of Alaska from Russia to the United States. Look at how they lie to us. Yes, there is a Russian bear here, and there's a totem pole here of an eagle. Okay? But this isn't a griffin. This is a phoenix. This is a mythological bird here. And this is a sea dragon, or some kind of a dragon, with a long tail, exactly what Yunus was swallowed by, called a hoot. And this is what the East peoples today, I'm going to make a whole video series on this, okay? What they call the Year of the Dragon. Just look up any dragon dance of China, Korea, Japan, Thailand, anything, Vietnam. Just look up any eagles in Western heraldry, okay? This is an old history of Beni Israel. It's all over the place, okay? Digress a bit there. Minarets of mosques, funny enough, also have this same idea. They're like lamp posts, right? Lit up. In fact, the word manar, actually relates to a lampstand, and it's a cognate of the Hebrew word menorah. Have you seen what menorahs look like? They look like a branched tree with a pillar, and they have lights like the luminaries of the cosmos. 7 branches as well. You know, 1 for every day of the week. So it means a place of light. Both words derived from nawr, related to light. This is where they call the adhan originally, right? The first minarets were actually placed opposite the Qibla wall. So there's a temple associated with these giant posts. The summit often finishes in a lantern-like structure, as if the sun is on top of it, and or a small dome, conical roof, or curving stone cap, which is in turn topped by a decorative metal finial. Okay, we've always made mosques. We make mosques to this day like this. Okay, why do we have these domes? Why do we have these pillars all the time? It's not necessary anymore. And you know, the Mount of Olives, funny enough, in Jerusalem, Mount Olivet for the Christians, is called At-Tur, the mountain. At-Tur, the mount. That's mentioned. That's a chapter of the Qur'an as well. It is described as the place from which Jesus ascended to heaven. Okay, that's in the Gospels, in the Acts of the Apostles. All right. The book of Ezekiel, and the glory of the Lord went up from the midst of the city and stood upon the mountain which is on the east side of the city. Where does the glory of the Lord come? This Mount of Olives is a mount for this olive tree in the Quran. It derives from so there was corruption in this biblical designation. Har HaMashicht, or Mount of Corruption, because idol worship started there, and obviously they lie in the Bible. They attribute that to King Solomon, building altars to other gods on the mountain which is before Jerusalem, just outside the limits of the holy city. Many Jews have wanted to be buried on the Mount of Olives since antiquity, based on the Jewish tradition from the book of Zechariah, that when the Messiah comes, the resurrection of the dead will begin there. And I already told you how Moriah and Jerusalem are all different reflections of this one polar Mecca. Okay? So they believe the resurrection of the dead will begin there, right? Think about that. Let's move on to obelisks. Obelisks, very prominent in architecture of the ancient Egyptians. They played a vital role in their religion. They placed them in pairs, exactly like Freemasons, exactly like minarets on the mosques, exactly like churches today are flanked by these 2 twin pillars, and they put them at the pairs at the entrance of their temples. Okay, this is in Paris. Most of the major obelisks in the world are in these new cities, like they're in these kind of European, Western cities. Pretty much every city has an obelisk to this day. The Ben was the mound that arose from the primordial waters of Nu, upon which the creator god Atum settled in the creation story of the Heliopolitan creation myth form of ancient Egyptian religion. The Ben stone is the top stone of the Egyptian pyramid, and it is also related to the obelisk. All right. So you can see so many versions of this. It's even in Istanbul as well, part of 3 pillars. Okay, The middle one being a serpentine column, all right? Commemorative monuments all over the world. China, Buenos Aires, New Jersey, Washington. This is in Russia. This is in Russia. This is in Dublin, Ireland. Jakarta. North Korea has an obelisk, okay? All over the world. Like stakes, you know? Then you have pagodas. The oldest and tallest pagodas were, strange enough, built of wood. Okay, later they start to make them of brick and stone, but interestingly enough, nobody can figure out what this word pagoda means. But some have derived the Sinhala word dagaba, or Sanskrit dhatugarba, or Pali dhahatugabha, meaning relic womb or chamber or reliquary shrine. I already mentioned in part 1 of this series how the navel of the worlds, the womb, and the shrine are all related to the Kaaba. Okay? Notice the design of this too. It's like a tree or a pillar with planes in it. Alright? Or lokas in it. So, you can see so many examples of this. Very, very popular in Asia. It's like the Asian iteration of this. Notice, I mean, they put it in between 4 rivers. I mean, they don't even hide the nature of this, okay? They describe it like a flower. The compass rose, right? Jacob's ladder. What is the word for ladder in Hebrew? Oh yeah, that's right. It's called Shulam. Ya'qub. So, in Arabic, this would be called Sullam. Tell me, what do you think Suleiman refers to? 2 ladders? Suleiman? Is Sulam related to a ladder? Is Sulam related to Islam? Is it related to Asilim? Is it related to Salam? Peace. You now start to see how these metaphorical kind of abstract terms like peace, sabr, patience, they're all related to tangible things, funny enough. So clearly when Allah says enter the silm, that doesn't mean Islam, because Islam is a separate word. He doesn't say enter Islam perfectly. He says adkhilu as-silmi, the silm. This is related to this word for ladder, sullam, right? So let's look a little bit deeper into this. Remember we talked about Mount Moriah, okay? Marwa. Well, some scholars believe that Jacob stopped for the night in a place which was Marwa. This is how it's called in Arabic. In Arabic today, the Arabs, the Palestinians, they call the Temple Mount Marwa. Not the one in Mecca, the one in Jerusalem. That means we got a bit of a problem here, and the real place is none of them. The future home of the temple in Jerusalem, it was considered to be a bridge between heaven and earth. Not necessarily just, a connection, literally a bridge. The ladder, therefore, signifies the bridge between heaven and earth. Moreover, the ladder alludes to the giving of the Torah as another connection between heaven and earth. Let me ask you something. Where do you think the command of Allah descends? Where do you think the angels descend? Could they possibly descend down Jacob's ladder? Could they descend down this connection between heaven and earth? Could the command come down there first and give life to a dead land, or land of the dead, and the water comes down from the heavens down, purifying, and the rivers form and they go towards all the corners of the earth? Could that be the case? Okay. In Islam, Muslim scholars, I really want you to pay attention to this part because this will go into part 6, okay? Muslim scholars drew a parallel between Jacob's vision of the ladder and Muhammad's event of the Mi'raj. The ladder of Jacob was interpreted to be one of the many symbols of God, and many see Jacob's ladder as representing in its form the essence of Islam, which emphasizes following the straight path. the straight path, cat's out of the bag now, the straight path could only be a straight path, okay? Straight up and down. This is Martin Lings, okay? He wrote this book called The Book of Certainty. Martin Lings wrote a biography of the Prophet Muhammad, okay? I think he even translated the Quran as well. He's quoted to have said, "The ladder of the created universe is the ladder which appeared in a dream to Jacob, who saw it stretching from heaven to earth, with angels going up and down upon it, and it is also the straight path. For indeed the way of religion is none other than the way of creation, itself retraced from its end back to its beginning." Notice we have this word here, as-sirat. As-sirat. Everyone will pass on this, okay? Also have Jack and the Beanstalk. No questions there. The ladder of divine ascent. The ladder of paradise. You guys, paradise, Mecca, Jerusalem, the lands of all of our forefathers that were spoken about in legends. This is why the disbelievers say these are just legends. They even call Abrahamic religions today, like Islam, legends. They call them mythology. If you think mythology is stupid, I've got news for you. They call your religions today mythology. This is why eventually they will make all religions obsolete and get rid of the Quran altogether. The Quran will be completely abandoned in the future, exactly like the Prophet Muhammad has said in the Quran itself. Mount Olympus is the highest mountain in Greece. Well, of course, they're going to pick the highest mountain because they need to convince the Greeks today that this is where all their ancestors lived. It is the home of the Greek gods. And by the way, I completely reject any notion of any gods or pantheons. This is just nothing more than our ancestors becoming deified. That's it. That's all. The Quran speaks about this as a pattern. Our ancestors become gods over time. When we look at Mount Olympus, doesn't Olympus give you an idea of alam? Alamus? Because the os is just the suffix and the p is put in there to throw you off. This is really alam. Mount Alam. Mount Alamiya. You think Greek just came from some lost Proto-Indo-European language? It came from Arabic. Yunan. Okay? Nobody can figure out what Olympus means. They think it means pure foot, conforming to Hesiod's description of the earth as a sort of footstool for heaven up from which rise the blessed gods. Well, yeah, heaven is a bit of a footstool in a sense. And that would make sense if basically the seat of the gods is the heavenly threshold. Okay? So, archaeological evidence shows that Mount Olympus was regularly visited in religious pilgrimages through antiquity and the early Middle Ages. For instance, ancient Greek pottery, coins, and evidence of sacrificial ashes estimated to be from 400 BC have been found on the summit. This is their way of telling you the real place definitely has pilgrimages. All right? This is part of the sacred mountains. Remember, I mentioned mountains so often. Then you have the omphalos. This is the Greek word for navel. Zeus, in his attempt to locate the center of the earth, because this is what they agree the navel is at Delphi, he launched 2 eagles. Notice eagles again. From the 2 ends of the world, and the eagles, starting simultaneously and flying at equal speed, crossed their paths above the area of Delphi, and so was the place where Zeus placed the stone. Okay? So, this is the navel. The Latin term is umbilicus mundi. The umbilical cord is like a connection between the navel and the mother. Mecca is called the mother. It's also called the womb. You can just look at part 1 of this series. Fallow stones were believed to allow direct communication with the gods. Oh, notice now the stone is a thing now. We have mountains, stones, islands, trees, connections, pillars, heavens, Middle Earth, stars, circumambulation. Are you starting to see the picture here, right? Judaism says the foundation at the peak of the Temple Mount is considered in traditional Jewish sources to be the place from which the creation of the world began, with several further major biblical events connected to it, not the least of which is the prophet's Isra. Jewish tradition holds that God revealed himself to his people through the Ark of the Covenant in the temple in Jerusalem, which rested on the foundation stone marking the center of the earth. Why is it called the Ark of the Covenant? Is it maybe because this is where Nuh's vessel rested on Al-Judi? Because we call his vessel the Ark of Noah. And I already showed you in the beginning how Chinese mythology talks about a great deluge and people were saved by it, strangely. And eventually they rested upon a great mountain. Okay, their vessel. In the center of the earth, no less. In Christianity, Jerusalem represents the navel of the world, the spiritual and cosmological center of the world. So they all can't be right. There has to be one that's correct. Okay? And we're not allowed to go there today. Notice black stone, Ben stone, Kaaba, lapis niger. Are you kidding me? The Romans had a black stone, and it's an ancient shrine, which is literally like the word, what they translate Kaaba meaning shrine. Okay? They have a black stone, guys, the Romans. Do you see how they've invented all these histories? They've invented these histories because it's talking about the same place. We have a common origin. Lingam. I already talked about Lingam in part 3 of my video series called the Magnet Mountain. Let's go to Israel, Lebanon, Jebel al-Sheikh. Now, Sheikh doesn't mean a religious official. As you can see in Arabic, it just means elder, an elderly person. So this is the Elder Mountain. They tell you everything from the names, okay? Jebel al-Sheikh is how you say it in Arabic. The Elder Mountain, the father of all the other mountains, okay? But it's also called Harmoon as well by some Arab speakers, because that's from the Aramaic and Hebrew as well. Okay, obviously everything's from Arabic in sense. Do you know what Harmoon means? It means haram, harama, taboo, consecrated, and the Arabic term al-haram. What do they translate al-haram as? Sacred enclosure. This is the Haram mountain. It's the Elder Haram mountain. And there's a forest around it as well. Some tall trees like cedars. That's why in Lebanon they call these trees the cedars of God. They're just giving the names of the real place and applying it to the local places. The mountain or summit is referred to as Safan in Ugaritic texts, where the palace of Baal is located in a myth about Atar. So there's also a palace there as well. Atar I mentioned in one of the videos on Endgame Islam called the Tariq, the piercing star. Okay, that's also related. There's also a star associated with this, like the pole star. Notice it's called the Mountain of Oath. Okay, there is a sacred building made of hewn blocks of stone on the summit of Mount Harmoon, Mount Haram, known as Qasr Antar, the Palace of Antar. It is the highest temple of the ancient world. The highest temple? And these are Roman shrines, Roman temples. We know who the Romans are in the Quran. The believers rejoice at their victory. According to the command of the greatest and holy God, those who take an oath proceed from here. The book of Enoch says Harmoon was said to have become known as the Mountain of Oath. Until today, the mount in front of Banias in Lebanon is known as Harmoon and is respected by the nations as what? A sanctuary. We're going to talk about a sanctuary in this video. Okay? You know, just look at the Paramount logo from the production company. Kunlun. Kunlun is called Kunlun Shan. Did you know the word for mountain? The word for mountain in Chinese is Shan. Just look at the letter Shan. Okay. Shanghai. Shang, the name of what do you call it? God in Chinese. Okay. It's an important symbol representing the axis mundi and divinity. It's an archetypal omphalos, or navel. Kunlun refers to a distant, exotic, and mysterious place. Different locations for Kunlun have been described. It's called the dwelling place of various gods and goddesses where fabled plants and mythical creatures dwell. Most of the important events in Chinese mythology were based around Kunlun. The Kunlun became identified with Mount Sumeru, Marwa. Kunlun began to be considered the source of 4 major rivers flowing to the 4 quarters of the compass. It resulted in a duality of paradises, East and West Paradise, identified with Kunlun. The term Kunlun Mountain can be translated as cavernous mountain, and the mythological Kunlun Mountain has been viewed as a hollow mountain located directly under the pole star. This is equivalent to the Sanskrit Saila Raja, meaning kings of the mountain, referring to a mythical, holy, cosmic mountain. Sometimes it's a pillar of the sky or the earth, sometimes appearing to be composed of multiple tiers, just like the pagodas of Asia. Accounts emphasize the difficulty of access to the mountains, and even more strikingly, its hallowed places due to its surrounding waters and steep cliffs of immense heights. Kunlun typically also has a strong association with various means to obtain immortality or longevity. Poetic descriptions tend to lavish Kunlun with paradisical detail, gem-like rocks and towering cliffs of jasper and jade. Jade being a green stone, right? Exotic jeweled plants, bizarrely formed and colored magical fungi, and numerous birds and other animals, together with humans who have become immortal beings. Sometimes it is the 8 immortals who are seen coming to pay their respects to the goddess Shiwangmu, perhaps invited to join her in a feast of immortal repast. Sham in Arabic means north. Shan is this mountain. Kun in Arabic means be, existence. Universe is called Kaun. Okay? Kunlun is believed to be the representation of the supreme deity Taidi. Even D like Deus, Theos, Deus, you know. According to some sources, his throne is at the top tier of the mountain, known as the Palace of Heaven. As Kunlun was sometimes viewed as the pillar holding up the sky and keeping it separated from the terrestrial plane, some accounts place the top of Kunlun in heaven rather than locating it on earth. In this case, the supreme deity's abode on Kunlun is actually in heaven, and Kunlun functions as a sort of ladder that can be used to travel between earth and heaven. Accordingly, any person who succeeded in climbing up to the top of Kunlun would be magically an immortal spirit. There was also a jade mountain neighboring to the north. Kunlun is seen as a Taoist paradise, inhabited by Xian. These are immortals, humans who are superhuman. They presided over Xingwangmu, and Xian were seen often as temporary residents, and they got there by means of flying on a magical crane or a dragon. We have the Tree of Immortality, we have 4 rivers, okay? And if we go on further, let's talk about the sanctuary known as the Temple Mount. Notice the Temple Mount is called Al-Haram, but I thought it told me that Haram is in Mecca. Well, what they did is they split the same place into two fake places. Okay? Al-Masjid al-Aqsa. Al-Masjid al-Aqsa I'm going to have to talk about some other time. But you can imagine, if this thing is a ladder in the center of the world, if Masjid al-Haram is the center of the world, if Mecca is the center of the world, then it's so logical that the end point of that journey, from that ladder, is going to be Al-Masjid al-Aqsa. Simple, right? The main praying hall of Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock near the center of the hill, which is the oldest extant Islamic structure in the world. Officially. Now, what's interesting about Al-Aqsa Mosque, and think about this deeply if you follow traditional Sunni Islam. Arabic and Persian writers, such as the 10th century geographer Al-Maqdisi, 11th century scholar Nasr Khusra, 12th century geographer Muhammad al-Idrisi, 15th century Islamic scholar Mujir ad-Din, as well as 19th century American and British Orientalists Edward Robinson, Guy Lestrange, and Edward Henry Palmer, explained that the term Masjid al-Aqsa refers to the entire Esplanade Plaza, which is the subject of this article, the entire area, including the Dome of the Rock, the fountains, the gates, the 4 minarets, because none of these buildings existed at the time the Quran was written. At the time the Quran was revealed, these structures did not exist. They were built by the Umayyads. Okay? They were conquered by Umar ibn al-Khattab. So how can you tell me this is the original location? Why isn't Moriah, okay, and Dome of the Rock and its octagonal features, why hasn't it been there all the time? I mean, look at this. Mosque of Umar, Mosque of Abu Bakr, and Sakhra Mosque. All right. So, yep. According to the Talmud, the foundation stone is the place from where the world was created and expanded into its current form. There is no way that is in Jerusalem today. No way, Jose. That place is in the real Mecca. All the Islamic scholars pretty much agree Mecca is the center of the world. So that brings us to pilgrimage. So many religions attach the connection with the divine to locations where miracles were performed or witnessed, locations where a deity is said to live or be housed, or any site that is said to have special spiritual powers. The Holy Land acts as a focal point, focal meaning central point, for the pilgrimages of the Abrahamic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. According to a Stockholm University study in 2011, these pilgrims visit the Holy Land to touch and see physical manifestations of their faith. Tell me honestly, do you see that in Mecca, in Medina, in Jerusalem? You see that there? Physical manifestations of your Iman, the Qur'an? No. But obviously somewhere they do exist. The Eleusinian mysteries included a pilgrimage in ancient Greece, a procession along the Yera Odos, sacred way. Interesting choice of words there. Some of them do full body prostrations in Tibetan culture. There's so many Buddhist pilgrimages, Hindu pilgrimages. Christian pilgrimage means, this is the words of Pope Benedict the 16th, okay? This is actually the current Pope. I think, no, is this the current Pope Benedict? No, it's the old one. To go on a pilgrimage really means to step out of ourselves in order to encounter God where He has revealed Himself, where His grace has shone with particular splendor and produced rich fruits of conversion and holiness among those who believe. They go to the Holy Land. They go to Rome. Do you see now? God has revealed Himself in a particular space in our world, where there are fruits, where Rome, the civilization of Rome is, okay? The real one. Most Hindu places of pilgrimages are associated with legendary events from the lives of their gods, aka prophets. Almost any place can become a focus for pilgrimage, but in most cases they are sacred cities, rivers, lakes, mountains. All the places in Mecca I already showed you in the beginning. Okay? So when we go to Islam, Islam is the religion that makes it mandatory. Mandatory. It's the only religion that makes you go back to the Mecca, to the Kaaba. It's meant to show that there's equality of all pilgrims in the eyes of Allah, in the Islamic faith. Hajj. Why is it one of 5 pillars? Are there 5 pillars in this place? Is that why they use pillars of Islam? What are these pillars of Islam supporting? You know? Must be carried at least once in their lifetime. Oh, there will be a Hajj carried out at least once in the lifetime of the believers. Judaism. Jerusalem was the center of the Jewish religious life and the site of the 3 pilgrimage festivals of Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot. So, Sukkot is when they build these kind of Kaaba-like boxes, right? When they were in exile. Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks. Then you have Passover. Passover is when Bani Israel are delivered from the hands of Pharaoh. Okay? Now, all adult men who were able were required to visit and offer sacrifices at the temple. Sounds kind of like Islam today. Qurban. They even call it Qurban. Okay? After the destruction of the temple, the obligation to visit Jerusalem and to make sacrifices no longer applied. The obligation was restored with the rebuilding of the temple, but following its destruction in 70 CE, the obligation to make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem and offer sacrifices again went into abeyance. The Jews believe they are in exile from their homeland currently. And then what happened was the Zionists created a new homeland for them. They could have made it anywhere. They could have made it Argentina. They could have made it, Nicaragua or Zambia or South Africa. They could have made it anywhere. They probably will make it Ukraine in the future. But the point is, they gave them one. But for most of their time, these people that call themselves Bani Israel, okay, they have been away from their sacred temple, from their central homeland. They were in exile. Okay, they even lost their original language, except from their scripture. Okay, the retaining wall of the Temple Mount is the most sacred and visited for Jews. They could have made anything here. They could have given anything, but they made a wall. Okay, there is a wall mentioned in the Quran as well. Sikhism does not consider pilgrimage as anything important spiritually. Eventually, however, there was a golden house built, house of gold. So I think this is the one, the golden temple, Harmandir Sahib. Doesn't Harmandir sound a bit like haram? Yeah? The golden temple in Amritsar, to become the chief spiritual cultural centers of the Sikh faith. And if a Sikh goes on pilgrimage, it is usually to this place. Notice the rivers and waters created around it. It's actually on an island. Okay? If you just check out the Golden Temple, right? It means exalted court, right? House of God, Harmandir Sahib. Come on. It's even shown as you need to cross a bridge to get there when they built it. Okay, this is clearly something that used to be there, but now it's not there anymore. We've lost the original. Okay. So let's go on to sanctuary. Sanctuary is a word derived from sanctuarium. Arium means a container to keep something in. Okay, remember how haram means a sacred enclosure? Well, sanctuarium fits the bill for this word, this translation. holy things or perhaps cherished people, sancta. The meaning was extended to places of holiness or safety, in particularly the whole demarcated area. Area around the altar in Western Christian traditions is called the sanctuary. It is also considered holy because of the belief in the physical presence of the God. We need to have this physical presence of God restored. Okay? That doesn't mean God descends down. It just means there is a place on earth that command descends. The sanctuary is separated from the navel. They actually call it a navel, where worshippers pray by an iconostasis, literally a wall of icons with 3 door steps in it. In other Oriental Orthodox traditions, a sanctuary curtain is used, aka tabernacle. In most modern synagogues, what do you see? The main room for prayer is known as the sanctuary. This is what they call the Holy of Holies. We're going to talk about this. This is where the Ark of the Covenant is, King Solomon's temple. There is a raised bimah, an elevated platform, from which services are conducted, which is where the Ark holding the Torah may reside. Okay? Yeah, interesting. Orthodox churches have it as well. The idea that persecuted persons should be given a place of refuge is ancient, perhaps even primordial, deriving itself from basic features of human altruism. In studying the concept across many cultures and times, anthropologists have found sanctuary to be a highly universal notion, one which appears in almost all major religious traditions and in a variety of diverse geographies. City of refuge, as described by the Book of Numbers and Deuteronomy in the Old Testament, as well as the Bedouin Arabs' idea of nazala, taking a refuge. This is related to anzala, tanzil, nazzala, nuzul. Things that come down, descend down, is the refuge place. So this is where people made refuge in the very beginning. And we even see that sanctuary applies to animals and plants, a wildlife preserve. No hunting is allowed therein. Okay? A shrine comes from the Latin word scrinium, a case or chest for books or papers, basically for writing. This is a sacred space. And the shrine here is usually the center of attention in the building and is given a place of prominence. This is usually how they translate the word Kaaba as shrine. Okay, they even have many of them box shapes, square shapes, cubicle shapes. Okay, shrines therefore attract the practice of pilgrimage. All right, something sets it apart as being particularly holy. A nativity scene could also be viewed as a shrine, as the definition of a shrine is any holy or sacred place. Islam's holiest structure, the Kaaba, within Al-Haram Masjid, in the city of Mecca. They literally spell it out for you here. This is the formula, okay? Through an ancient temple, though an ancient temple, in the sense of a house of God, may be seen as a shrine, due to it housing a respected relic called Hajar al-Aswad. Just look at my video, part 3 of the Mecca series, part 1 of the Mecca series, but mainly part 3, and also being the partial focus of the world's largest pilgrimage practice, the Hajj. 2 of the oldest and notable Islamic shrines are the Dome of the Rock and the smaller Dome of the Chain, built on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. The Dome of the Chain is an Islamic freestanding dome building located. This chain, al-silsila, this is a word meaning like the chain of descent, okay? Like the genealogy as well. Silsila. This is where the Prophet Muhammad is supposed to have made his Isra and Mi'raj, right? The night journey of Jerusalem, okay? flowers, purified water, food, incense. This is what they do for the shrines in Buddhism. And guess what? We do the same thing. The sacrifices are the food. The zamzam is the purified water. Okay? I believe they even give out flowers outside Mecca, outside the Haram. And they have incense inside the Kaaba itself. Okay? Burning. Hörgers. Hörgers in Germanic paganism. Herg. Doesn't that kind of sound as Hajj as well? Herg. Like the heart of the place. Hearken. Okay? The holy places, whereas its Old English cognate Herg could mean holy grove. I already explained the sacred grove of Haram. Mash'ar al-Haram. This is related to the verse of Al-Arafah, the mountain where you do the Hajj. It can also mean temple. Okay? Taoism has these shrines and gardens, running water or fountains, small burning braziers or candles with or without incense. Temples consist of gardens and then a large pavilion where incense is burnt. All right? This is an article about the Kaaba, and I wanted to highlight this exact part here because this one tells you a lot. Grünebaum, in classical Islam, points out that the experience of divinity of that period was often associated with stones, mountains, special rock formations, or trees of strange growth. Armstrong further says that the Kaaba was thought to be at the center of the world, with the gate of heaven directly above it. The Kaaba marked the location where the sacred world intersected with the profane. The embedded black stone was a further symbol of this as a meteorite that had fallen from the sky and linked heaven and earth. Subhanallah. That brings us to Alatir. This is a very suspicious name. Allah Tir. Allah Tur. Tur Allah. At-Tur. The sacred stone in East Slavic legends. The father to all stones. The navel of the earth. Containing sacred letters and endowed with healing properties. You could imagine people at that time would probably want to crowd it and put their hands on it and kiss it as much as they can. Alatir is associated with an altar. Oh, that sounds like At-Tur as well. Alatir, altar, At-Tur, Allah, Tur, At-Tur. Located in the navel of the world, in the middle of the world ocean on the Buyan Island. You can also say Bayan, Bayanat. On it stands the world tree. The stone is endowed with healing and magical properties. Spiritual verses describe how from under the white Alatir stone flows a miraculous source that gives the whole world food and healing. The Alatir is guarded by the wise snake Garafena and the bird Gagana. The name has been compared to the word altar and to the town of Alatir. This is in Siberia. This is like really high up there. In Russian folklore, it is a sacred stone, the father to all stones, the navel of the earth, containing sacred letters and endowed with healing properties. A mighty force that has no end. I probably sound like a broken record at this point, but just to hammer in the point. In the middle of the blue sea lies the Latir stone. Many sailors sail in the sea. They stop at the stone. They take much medicine from it. They send it all over the wide world. That is why the Latir Sea is the father of seas. That is why the Latir stone is the father of stones. In Polish folk culture and language, the stone is located on the borderline of the worlds, beyond the places of human residence that we reside in today. On the stone, things are happening related to change or the state of waiting for it. It symbolizes the center of the world, a transition from one world to another. It is related to the dead and evil spirits. In folklore, this stone is named white stone, cerulean stone, gray stone, golden stone, sea stone, heavenly or paradisiac stone, and even black stone. White stone together with water and a tree is in a sacred place. Okay? This is your foundation stone in Russian mythology. That brings us to Japan. There's a shrine called the Isa shrine, or you could even call it Isa shrine, right? Clearly the Japanese have a memory of Isa as well. The shrine buildings are made of solid cypress wood, and they use no nails, but instead joined wood. Isn't that peculiar about Japanese carpentry? They learned somewhere in their history that if they put nails, there's going to be some magnet probably that takes out all the nails anyway. So they probably did everything based on wood. Okay? So the shrine is one of Shinto's holiest, most important sites. This is the religion of Japan, the ancient religion of Japan. Access to both sites is strictly limited. It's protected. It's a sanctuary. Nobody can just go in there. With the general public not allowed beyond sight of the thatched roofs of the central structure, hidden behind 4 tall wooden fences or walls. However, tourists are free to roam around the forest. Of course, there's a grove nearby. 1 out of 10 Japanese conducted an okage mairi pilgrimage to the shrine during the Edo period. The shrine is considered a sanctuary. Are you starting to see how these things are connected? This is not an accident. They use the same terminology. Get this. A small wooden hut containing a wooden pole a little over 2 meters in height called the Shin no Mihashira, the new sacred central pole. The erection of a single post in the center of a sacred area strewn with stones represents the form taken by Japanese places of worship in very ancient times. Yeah, because they just put this concept in the Japanese islands today. In August, in a long-standing tradition, the people who live in Isa are allowed to enter the area around the inner sanctum of the Naiku as well as the Geku. Holy of Holies, much. Mihrab, much. After crossing a short, wide bridge, pilgrims to the shrine encounter the Temizusha, a small roofed structure containing a pool of water for use in ritual purification. Visitors are encouraged to wash their hands and rinse their mouths at Temizusha as a symbolic act to clean the mind and body of impurity. That kind of sounds like what people do when they go to pray near the Kaaba. When they go to approach the Salah. Okay? You can see this is a very ancient practice. They have just put it all over the world. That brings us to the Holy of Holies, Sanctum Sanctorum, Sanctuary of Sanctuaries, Holy of Holies, Al-Mihrab. Just watch part 3 of this video series called Magnet Mountain. This is the holiest place for Bani Israel. Qadesh HaQadoshim, Quds Al-Qudsi. That's why the Palestinians today call Jerusalem Al-Quds, because they understand very well this is a reflection of the Quds place, the place of the Quds. So this is inside the tabernacle, and then later inside the temple. You're going to see that this has to do with the womb as well. It refers to the holy relics contained in the sanctuary where you store in a shrine, right? In Hinduism, the temple's innermost part, where the murti of the deity is kept, forms the garbhagriha, also referred to as Sanctum Sanctorum. It literally means the holy place or thing of the holy place or thing. Okay? The Latin word sanctum may be used in English following Latin or a holy place or haram. Okay? Sanctuary. And that brings us to Garbhagriha. Garbhagriha in Hinduism is the innermost sanctuary of Hindu and Jain temples as well, which is called Sanctum Sanctorum. Do you know that it literally means womb chamber? The Sanskrit word garbha for womb and griha for house. The womb house. The Bayt al-Haram. The house of the womb. The sanctuary. The Kaaba. Mecca. A garbhagriha is normally square. It sits on a plinth. And basically it's a support column, okay, bottom of a statue that supports a column. Also at least approximately a cube. That's the shape of it, okay? Compared to the size of the temple that may surround it, and especially the large tower commonly found above it, a garbha griha is a rather small room. What do they have in the middle of it? A black stone that represents Shiva, okay? I mean, there are pillars in here. And look, the tower that caps the garbha griha forms the main vertical axis of the temple and is usually understood to represent the axis mundi, the axis of the worlds, through Mount Meru, Mount Marwa. By contrast, the garbha griha usually forms part of the main horizontal axis of the temple, which generally runs east-west. The murti of the deity is ritually and symmetrically positioned at the center of the garbha griha shrine, again, Kaaba, and represents the axis mundi, the axis about which the world is oriented and which connects heaven and earth. Entrance to the Hindu garbha griha has been traditionally restricted to priests who perform the services there. In Jain temples, all suitably bathed and purified Jains are allowed to enter. Wudu. In Tamil, the garbha griha is called Karuvarai, meaning the interior of the sanctum sanctorum. The word Karuvarai means womb chamber. The word womb means fetus, and arai means a room. Okay, Sachitananda is an epithet and description of the subjective experience of the ultimate unchanging reality, such as that typified by the garbha griha. So in Islamic mythology, the thing to really take home from this is that the earth is flat, it's surrounded by water, veiled in darkness, with Mount Qaf at the edge of the visible world. These are mountains of Qaf, by the way. They encompass the world. Despite being flat, there is no trace of disc-shaped earth within cosmological treatises. The heavenly dome ends at a world serpent or agon. Both heaven and hell coexist with a temporary world called the dunya, and there's also mention of a tree of heaven. Some people think this is Tuba. Okay? We're going to talk about this. Jabalqa and Jabalsa, also known. So Jabalqa and Jabalsa, rather, also known as Jabalq and Jaburs, are two legendary cities mentioned in Islam. They are said to be made of emerald and visited by the Islamic prophet Muhammad in his night journey. In a conversation between Muhammad and his cousin Ali ibn Abi Talib, the cities are described as situated in darkness and contiguous to the primeval mountains of Qaf. I mentioned this in part 3. Jabalqa is located in the easternmost corner of the world and Jabalsa on the westernmost one. The figure Dhul Qarnayn mentioned in the Qur'an is said to have tried to visit the cities but gave up halfway. However, he was successful in seeing the places where the sun rises and sets. Funny enough that Muhammad visited these cities in his night journey, according to these traditions. Okay? And there are people, they're related to Gog and Magog, which is related to Dhul Qarnayn as well. We're going to have to make an entire video on Dhul Qarnayn. That is like one of the most important stories in the Quran, for sure. So when you talk about date palms, remember we mentioned earlier, there's no palms. They're not trees, okay? It's a flowering plant species. There's no mention of it being part of the tree family. So clearly it doesn't fit the bill, okay? You can look at it. They do not produce tree rings, date palms. It's just not the same type of wood. You cannot crucify or hang someone on this, right? It's basically a tall grass. It doesn't even have branches, guys. You look at a date palm. Where are the branches? Oh, right, there aren't any. The world tree has branches. But funny enough, they have used the palm tree in these Mediterranean cultures to show something from the truth, okay? Because they can use whatever they want. Now let's go all the way down. So in Mandaism, this is the only surviving Gnostic religion from, I think what you would call Sabianism today. The date palm called Sindirka can refer both to the tree and its fruit, symbolizes the cosmic tree, and is often associated with the cosmic wellspring, known as Aina. It's even called the same thing in Arabic. The date palm associated with masculinity and wellspring associated with femininity, and often mentioned together as heavenly symbols in Mandaean texts. All right. Now you see how they used to depict this palm tree as well. You could be mistaken, to think these leaves remind, the ancient recollection of evergreen leaves, evergreen needles, okay? And even the clusters of dates, some would have a basic shape of a pine cone, because pine cones have these little, holes in them. And then obviously the trunk extends all the way to the top, so you don't actually see the top part of the tree. It's just a trunk, right? So interesting idea. Perhaps the palm tree evolved from some kind of a memory of some other type of tree in the center of the worlds. Tuba is mentioned in the Quran. Whether it's a tree or not is another story. But clearly the ahadith have mentioned, according to Sahih al-Bukhari, Anas ibn Malik said that the Prophet said, "There is a tree in paradise which is so big and huge that if a rider travels in its shade for 100 years, he would not be able to cross it." Abu Hurairah similarly says, "In paradise there is a tree whose shade a rider could travel for 100 years without crossing it." Okay? In shade, long extended. So it's anyone's guess which tree this Tuba tree is. But clearly, Sunni Muslims agree that there are trees that are so large we cannot comprehend them. Some of these trees are mentioned in Zaqum, some of these trees are mentioned as Sidrat al-Muntaha, some of these trees are Tuba, okay? In Christian mythology, mythos comes from the classical Greek, which means story or narrative. It doesn't mean a fake account. It's just the hadith, it's just the Quran being the best of the hadith, right? Ahsan al-hadith. Christ ascends into heaven from the Mount of Olives. The axle of the world, their world centers, mentioned all the time in Christianity. In fact, interesting enough, it's discussed with the crucifixion, Golgotha, the summit of the cosmic mountain at the center of the earth, location where Adam had been created and buried. According to this tradition, when Christ is crucified, his blood falls on Adam's skull, buried at the foot of the cross, and redeems him. Ridiculous. The image of Adam's skull beneath the cross appears in many medieval representations of the crucifixion. So if you're a Christian, your tradition in Eastern Christian folklore believes that the crucifixion took place where Adam resided and was buried. That's got to be at the center of the world. That's got to be in paradise. The creation myths of the world suggest the Garden of Eden may also be considered a world center. According to Christian tradition, Christ had descended into hell after his death in order to free the souls there. This event is known as harrowing of hell. So just like people can go up the ladder to heaven, they can probably go down the ladder to underworld as well. Many of these myths involve the loss of paradise that existed at the beginning of the world. Yes, we definitely lost it, and the city in it. Numerous legendary creatures are attested in Christian mythology. These include Behemoth, Leviathan, angels, demons, Nephilim, Re'im, Ziz, and dragons. This is a good Jewish mythology rather. The firmament. In Genesis 1:17, the stars are set in the firmament. Day 3, they create a ring of oceans surrounding a singular continent. God does not create or make trees and plants, but instead commands the earth to produce them. The creation of man, the first man, Adam, is on day 6. Yawm al-Jumu'ah. Okay? Let's scroll down. Clearly people knew they could ascend to the heavens, right? Or at least they tried, knowing that there is some feasible way where they built these ways of ascent. Okay? So we go all the way down. Interesting thing that the Talmud states, there's a giant deer and a giant lion, which are mythical creatures originating in a mythical forest called Bay Ilai. Bay means house. Ilai is like literally just, they're not even hiding Beit Allah. The mythical forest is associated with Beit Allah. Okay? The Beit. The place of residence. A remarkable custom mentioned in the Talmud is that of planting trees when children are born and intertwining them to form the chuppah when they marry. And if you're not aware what a chuppah is, it's literally what this arsh in the Quran is. Basically, you have 4 columns, 4 pillars, pillars you cannot see, pillars of the earth that are embedded in the Jannah, in the canopy. Okay? And it's basically like, it contains the pillars. None of these pillars have been seen in any of the lands. We'll have to talk about cosmology another time. Yeah, Isaac Asimov, a Russian Jewish science fiction writer, basically, he says all the Jewish myths, all the Torah, the Old Testament, the biblical, prophetic accounts, that's what all science fiction is inspired with. It has all the same tropes as science fiction. Science fiction comes from the scripture. Fantasy comes from the scripture. Okay? It's not the other way around. Then we look at religion in pre-Islamic Arabia. You're going to find some interesting things here. Basically, it was very similar to what we see today. There's not much different from what the pagan Arabs did at the time of the Prophet Muhammad than what we do today. Because this thing has just been inherited generation after generation. That's why we do it now outside of that land. Sacred places were known as Hima, Haram, Mahram, and within these places all living things were considered inviolable and violence was forbidden. In most of Arabia, these places would take the form of open-air sanctuaries with distinguishing natural features such as springs and forests. Does that sound like Arabia to you? Cities would contain temples enclosing the sacred area with walls and featuring ornate structures. This is very likely the original Arabia. Pilgrimages to sacred places would be made at certain times of the year. Pilgrim fairs of Central and Northern Arabia took place in specific months designated as violence-free, allowing several activities to flourish, such as trade, though in some places only exchange was permitted. Okay. Mecca is supposed to be a city of trade. On the Silk Road, all the cities get all the best trade from it. According to tradition, the Kaaba was a cube-like, originally roofless structure housing a black stone revered as a relic. Interesting that it's a roofless structure, almost as if some kind of giant tree is growing from it. The sanctuary was dedicated to Hubal, who, according to some sources, was worshipped as the greatest of the 360 idols the Kaaba contained, which probably represented the days of the year. Yeah, they did, because they were in the center of the universe. They're going to see 360 days exactly there. Okay. Various legends existed about the idols, including one that they were petrified after they committed adultery in the Kaaba. We even have mention of petrification, like Allah says, be you stones or iron. So you can see when something gets rajam, stoning, then you have rajim, but the devils are pelted by the stars, and we have petrification. That's why, of course, they're going to have a candidate for Mecca called Petra. And of course, they would see these ancestors or these demons or whatever. Their idols were like petrified people. They're the epitome of these statues, right? Pilgrimage to Mecca was a popular custom. Some Islamic rituals, including processions around the Kaaba and between the hills of As-Safa and Marwa. In the Quran, basically, you go around the Kaaba and between the hills of As-Safa and Marwa. We don't have that, configuration in Mecca today. As well as the salutation, Labaik, Ya Allah, labaik. They do this exact same thing there, repeated on approaching the Kaaba. I have believed to antedated Islam. This goes from before the Prophet Muhammad officially. Spring water acquired a sacred character in Arabia early on, and Islamic sources state that the well of Zemzem became holy long before the Islamic era of the Prophet Muhammad. The conquest of Mecca led to the destruction of the idols around the Kaaba, including Hubal. We're going to talk about this conquest of Mecca eventually. It's very exciting, inshallah. I really want to show you this conquest. So, following the conquest, shrines and temples dedicated to deities were destroyed, such as the shrines of Al-Lat, Al-Uzza, and Manat. In Ta'if, Nakhla. Keep mind of that word. Nakhla is a place in Saudi Arabia today. No palm tree there, of course. And Al-Qudayd, respectively. There were battles fought in places like this as well. So you can see pre-Islamic Arabia is just like any of these civilizations. Here are some honorable mentions. In Aborigine Australians, they have the rainbow serpent, just like the Bifrost of the Rainbow Bridge, just like the serpent that you see in every mythology, like everything around this world tree. A snake of some enormous size living within the deepest water holes from the ground, the underworld, of many of Australia's waterways, descended from that larger being visible as a dark streak in the Milky Way. It reveals itself to people in the world as a rainbow. I'm going to talk about the Milky Way and the Rainbow Bridge, inshallah, in the next one. So stay tuned for that. Maori mythology. Interesting how there's a whole people called Muri, Maori, Marwa, Mora, Lemuria, Almuria. All right. The evolution of the universe is likened to a tree with its base, tap roots, branching roots, and root hairs. That's exactly what the tree is. And even another theme of Maori theology, evolution to the development of a child in the womb. All right. We have Hawaiian mythology and religion as well. These people are supposed to have nothing to do with any of Islamic customs or even, Indo-European cultures. Prayer was an essential part of life. The gods possessed great mana. This is the supernatural force that permeates the universe. It's mentioned in the Quran as manna, which Bani Israel were given. But man too has some mana. Heiau served as focal points of prayer in Hawaii, sort of like how the Kaaba, Masjid al-Haram are focal points of prayer, and then there's offerings and sacrifices put there. Prayers are offered at these temples of worship. They also have shrines, and it's a sacred place and an altar. And funny enough, it's always around a mountain as well. Okay? So there's a lot to find. The more deeper you look, it's like, there's something going on. So the sky itself in Baltic theology, Latvian mythology, it's called Sky Mountain. The sky is called Sky Mountain. The sky is also called Mountain of Pebbles, Silver Mountain, Ice Mountain, probably referring to stars or snow. Her path leads her across the mountain of sky to the sea, which is sometimes interpreted as symbolic representation of the sky or cosmic ocean. On the path of the sun, in or by the water, often on an island or rock in the middle of the seas, is the Austras Cox, the tree of dawn, thought to represent the Axis Mundi. Counterparts might be the polar star, the Milky Way. You see, the world of the dead is called Aiz Saula Vin Saula, the other sun, where the sun goes at night. In Egyptian mythology, this is the Duat land. It is related to various mother deities. Zemismate, Mother of Earth, sometimes called Nave, literally meaning death, or navel, you see. We look into Lithuanian, Baltic theology. The whole thing is based around this. It contains mentionings about Prussian religion in the center of Baltic region, Romuva. We have a central hole, 4 rivers, and a disc, and then mountains on the edges of the earth, okay? It's uncanny, just uncanny resemblance. We have Romuva. It has the word Rom in there. It's a tree in the middle. There's a fire, people worshiping around it, okay? Just look at what Romuva is. Okay, Romuva is basically a movement today who has this symbol. Have you seen this before? The symbol of Tawaf has also this symbol, the world tree. Kind of looks like the Jewish menorah, doesn't it? As if that's the tree as well. This is a new religion, okay? They're just borrowing the same thing over and over and over again. Notice how Remuva is a temple, okay? It's a temple. So, yeah, this is Lithuania. Holy groves are obviously related to it. The worshipping of these groves. They put garlands around it. It's just the same thing over and over and over again. The Estonians believe to have turned around a pillar or a tree which the skies were nailed with the North Star. The Milky Way is known as the Bird's Way in Estonian, Linnuti. And it was a branch of the world tree, Ilmapu, or the way by which birds moved and took the souls of the deceased to the other world. These myths were based on animistic beliefs. Now, they were based upon the old religion, okay? I mean, if you look to Finnish mythology... Alright, let me just show you briefly before we end this. This is the structure of the world in Finnish mythology. Whirlpool, central mountain, highest one. Dome of stars, pillar, central axis, rotating, flat disk. Simple, North Pole. Lintukoto, home of the birds, edges of the earth. Milky Way is called Linnunrata, path of the birds. Alright. We go to Sami tradition, symbol of the world. World tree. This is what they're drawing. They're drawing these in different ways. There's like a house at the bottom. Reaches up to the North Star, literally the heavens, similar to found in Finnish mythology. Seides, unusual landforms or rock formations, can be considered to have spiritual significance. Noedi is a mediator between the human world and Saivo, the underworld, on behalf of the community. Sort of like messengers. We have Cherokee myths, right? The creation myth of the Cherokee describes the earth as a great floating island surrounded by an ocean. It hangs from the sky by cords attached to the 4 cardinal points. The story tells that the first earth came to be when Dionysi, the little water beetle, came down from the sky world to see what was below the water. He paddled over the surface of the water but found no place to rest. He dived to the bottom of the water and brought up some soft mud. This mud expanded in every direction and became the earth. The Egyptian mythology has the scarab beetle rolling the dung along the sand. And the water spider is said to have first brought fire to the inhabitants of the earth. We have a mention of the house of the spider in the Quran. Okay. The formation of a world on the island. We have even this idea of the Congo religion. This is from Bukongo. The Bukongo people of West Central Africa. The Bantu ethnic people. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. They have this diagram of the creation of the universe. Okay. Not always accurate, but you see that this bisector is formed. They have some idea of 4 continents, 4 rivers, the sun going around them. Okay? So, let's finish this off on Tenrikyo. Tenrikyo is a Japanese new religion. And basically, you're going to find this very strange. It's a monotheist religion, supposedly. And it has a shrine of God in there. They worship God of origin, God in truth, known by Tsukihi, Tenri Onomikoto, or Aganeme-sama, God the parent, or God the father. Look at this. The ultimate spiritual aim of Tenrikyo is the construction of the Kanrodai, a divinely ordained pillar in an axis mundi called the Jiba, and the correct for performance of the Kagura ritual around the Kanrodai. which will bring about the salvation of all human beings. The idea of the jiba as the origin of earthly creation is called motonori, or the principle of origin. A pilgrimage to the jiba is interpreted as a return to one's origin, so the greeting Okaeri Nasai, welcome home, is seen on many inns in Tenri city. The sacred name of the single God and creator of the entire universe in Tenrikyo is Tenri Onomikoto. And this is so obvious and blatant what this means, right? Tenrikyo utilizes traditional musical instruments in its otsutome, service or duty. So basically, they understand, whoever made this religion, kind of a culty religion, understands this divinely ordained pillar is in a real place where we come from. And with that, I hope you enjoyed part 3. Longest one yet, but take it or leave it. Salam. Peace.